The scent of hyacinth and damp, rich earth clung to Cora's penthouse apartment, a living perfume that battled the sterile, air-conditioned chill of Manhattan. Outside, the September sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, stretching over Central Park like a painted canvas. Below, the city buzzed with its relentless energy. Yellow cabs streaking down Fifth Avenue, sirens wailing in the distance, a symphony of ambition and life. For most New Yorkers, it was just another beautiful autumn day. For Cora, it was the end of the world. Her world, at least. Her hands, usually steady and precise as she coaxed life from stubborn seeds and bare branches, trembled slightly as she snipped the final stem of a midnight purple dahlia. Her studio, which took up the entire top floor, was a greenhouse paradise. Glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, but inside, it was a jungle of vibrant life. Rare orchids dripped from the ceiling, walls of ferns created living tapestries, and tables overflowed with floral arrangements destined for the city's most exclusive galas and wealthiest homes. Vogue had recently called her the Spring Witch of Manhattan, a title she found both flattering and painfully ironic. They had no idea how right they were. A single perfectly healthy gardenia in a terracotta pot on her workbench began to brown at the edges of its pristine white petals. A subtle, almost imperceptible decay. Cora sighed, a sound lost beneath the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. It was starting. The change. It always began inside her, a slow, creeping cold that her most luxurious cashmere sweaters couldn't warm. Then, it would begin to affect the life around her. Small things at first. A wilting flower here, a yellowing leaf there. It was a countdown, timed not by a clock, but by the very pulse of nature, which was inextricably tied to her own. Her phone buzzed on the steel countertop. The screen read, Senator Diana Meter. Her mother. Cora took a deep breath, composing her features into a mask of casual brightness before answering. Hi, Mom. Cora, darling. Her mother's voice was exactly as you'd expect from a powerful DC senator, smooth, confident, and carrying an undercurrent of command. I just saw the photos from the Met Gala fundraiser. Your arrangements were breathtaking. You truly have a gift. You make life bloom wherever you go. Cora winced at the irony. Thanks, Mom. I'm glad they liked them. Are you taking care of yourself, honey? You sound a little tired. You know how you get this time of year. That seasonal melancholy always seems to hit you hard. Maybe a trip to the vineyard in Napa? Some sunshine would do you good. Sunshine. If only it were that simple. I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot of work. The autumn collection is demanding. It was a lie, but a necessary one. How could she possibly tell her mother the truth? Sorry, Mom, can't make it to Napa. I have a prior commitment to co-rule the Underworld. The paperwork is a nightmare. Well, don't overdo it. Your father and I worry. I know. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetie. Call me tomorrow. I'll try, Cora said, knowing full well that tomorrow, her phone would have no signal where she was going. They ended the call, and the silence of the penthouse felt heavier than before. Her mother's concern was a constant, loving weight on her shoulders. Diana Meter had built her political career on environmental protection and agricultural innovation. She was, in her own way, a goddess of the harvest, celebrated for making the world a greener, more fertile place. The secret of her daughter's life would shatter her. Cora walked from her bright, airy studio into the master bedroom. The contrast was jarring. One side of the massive walk-in closet was filled with light fabrics, floral print dresses, white linen pants, silk blouses in every shade of green and yellow. The other side was a void of black, gray, and deep jewel tones, tailored pantsuits, severe black dresses in leather and silk, sharp-shouldered coats, and elegant, understated gowns that seemed to absorb the light. She began to pack, a ritual she performed twice a year. The summer clothes were carefully folded and placed in vacuum-sealed bags, to be stored away. The winter wardrobe was laid out, ready. It wasn't about seasons, not really. It was about selves. Today, she would shed Cora, the celebrated floral artist. Tonight, she would once again become Persephone. As the sun began to dip below the New Jersey skyline, casting long, dramatic shadows across the park, her personal phone, a sleek, burner-style device she kept hidden, vibrated once. A single text message. The pomegranate is ripe. There was no name attached, but none was needed. A cold shiver, one that had nothing to do with the temperature, ran down her spine. It was both a summons and a promise. It was from him. Aiden. She walked to the window, looking down at the city she loved, the world of life, light, and color. She would miss the taste of fresh strawberries, the feeling of warm sun on her skin, the simple joy of watching a seedling sprout. For the next 6 months, her world would be one of echoing caverns, the gleam of unrefined precious metals, the silent, diligent work of souls, and the cool, steady presence of its king. It hadn't been a kidnapping, not in the classical sense. There were no chariots bursting from the earth. It had been a contract. A deal. Aiden's empire, Plutus Group, was the largest, most powerful mining and resource conglomerate on the planet. They owned the earth, everything beneath the topsoil. And his influence ran deeper than anyone knew. He was powerful, magnetic, and terrifyingly lonely. And he had wanted her. He had offered her a choice, a life of unimaginable power and influence in his world, a world that was, in its own way, just as vital as the one on the surface. She would be its queen. The price. Half of her year. Half of her life. She had accepted. A quiet chime from the foyer announced the arrival of her private elevator. It was time. Cora took one last look around the greenhouse. The browning gardenia had now shed 2 of its petals onto the workbench. Her touch, her very presence, was already becoming a blight. It was kinder to leave. She picked up her single, dark suitcase and walked towards the elevator. The door slid open to reveal a man in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face impassive. His name was Michael, but she privately thought of him as Sharon. He never spoke, but his presence was a constant during these transitions. He took her bag without a word. "Is he waiting?" Cora asked, her voice quiet. Michael simply nodded. She stepped inside. The elevator was not a normal residential one. There were no buttons for other floors. Just a single, unmarked panel that Michael pressed. There was no lurch, no sense of downward movement at first, just a soft hum and a pressurization of the cabin. Then, a slow, inexorable descent. Down, past the lobby. Down, past the parking garage. Down, past the city's subways and utility tunnels. Down into the deep, secret places of the earth, into the bedrock of the island itself. The air grew cooler, the scent of flowers and city pollution replaced by the clean, metallic smell of stone and ozone. Cora closed her eyes, letting the identity of Cora Summer slip away like a discarded dress. The artist, the daughter, the public figure, they all faded. When the elevator doors finally whispered open, she would be someone else. She would be home. And he would be there. The elevator slowed to a smooth stop. A soft chime echoed in the silence. Cora opened her eyes. The steel door slid apart, not revealing a dimly lit garage, but a vast open space carved from gleaming black obsidian, lit by the soft, ethereal glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the high, vaulted ceiling. And standing in the center, waiting just for her, was Aiden, the king of the Underworld. Aiden stood unmoving as she approached, a figure of stark contrast against the glowing cavern. He was dressed in a custom-tailored suit of charcoal gray so dark it was almost black, the fine wool seeming to drink the ambient light. His hair was the color of jet, but a touch of silver at his temples caught the fungal luminescence, glinting like threads of captured starlight. He wasn't classically handsome in the way of the models and actors Cora dealt with in her upper life. His features were too sharp, his presence too intense. His power was not something he projected, but something the world seemed to bend around, a center of immense gravity. Only his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held any softness, and it was reserved solely for her. "Welcome home, Persephone." His voice was a low baritone that didn't echo in the vast space, but seemed to be absorbed by it, a sound as deep and resonant as the earth itself. "Aiden." She said his name, and the transformation was complete. The last remnants of Cora, the sunny floral artist, evaporated. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted. Here, she was not the spring witch. She was a queen. "It's good to be back." He offered his arm, his movements economical and precise. She took it, the fabric of his suit cool beneath her fingertips. "You look tired," he observed, his gaze sweeping over her. "The upper world wears on you." "It's loud," she admitted, as they began to walk across the polished obsidian floor. "And bright. It takes a lot of energy to create." "And here we can serve," he said with a faint smile. Their footsteps were the only sound as they moved through the great hall. This was the central artery of Aiden's, their, domain. It was not a place of fire and torment as the old stories claimed. It was a marvel of subterranean engineering and raw, elemental beauty. Veins of raw gold, silver, and platinum snaked through the obsidian walls, not as decoration, but as living conduits of the Earth's power. High above, the sprawling network of glowing fungi pulsed in a slow, silent rhythm, like a second heartbeat for the world itself. Figures moved in the periphery, silent and diligent. The echoes. The workforce of the Plutus Group. In the old days, they might have been called shades or souls. Now, they were the disembodied consciousnesses, the digital footprints, and the residual energies of those who had passed. They were not prisoners, but assets, their accumulated knowledge and experiences repurposed to manage the vast, complex systems of the deep earth. They processed data, monitored geothermal vents, and managed the endless, silent logistics of the underworld. They moved with purpose, their forms slightly blurred at the edges, their faces indistinct, and they parted before their king and queen like a silent, respectful river. "Has it been quiet?" Persephone asked, her eyes scanning the familiar, majestic hall. "Reasonably. Production in the South American diamond veins is up 7%. We've stabilized the geothermal fissures beneath the Yellowstone caldera. But there have been issues. We'll discuss it in the office." Their office was not some grand throne room. It was a massive, semicircular chamber at the heart of the complex, one entire wall of which was a sheet of transparent, diamond-hard crystal. It looked out into a cavern of truly breathtaking scale, where a slow-moving river of molten silver flowed, casting a warm, white light on the stalactites and stalagmites that grew like the teeth of a sleeping giant. The room was dominated by a colossal desk carved from a single piece of white marble, shot through with veins of pure black tourmaline. 2 chairs, equals in size and design, sat behind it. This was the center of power, the boardroom from which the wealth and stability of the entire planet's crust were managed. Aiden led her not to the desk, but to a small, obsidian table near the crystal wall. On it sat a single object, a pomegranate. It was flawless, its skin a deep, leathery red that seemed to pulse with an inner light. It was far more perfect than any fruit that grew under the sun. This was the ritual, the final seal on her return. Aiden picked up a small, silver knife. With surgical precision, he sliced the fruit open, revealing the glistening, jewel-like seeds within. He held it out to her. "To bind you to the dark," he murmured, the ancient words a stark contrast to their modern surroundings. "And to bind the dark to me," she responded, her voice steady. She took the fruit and carefully extracted 6 seeds. One by one, she placed them on her tongue. They burst with a flavor that was both intensely sweet and deeply earthy, a taste of rich soil, of ancient stone, of absolute belonging. With each seed she swallowed, she could feel the last of the sun's warmth leaving her, replaced by the cool, immense, and steady power of the deep earth. She felt her senses sharpening to this new reality, the subtle vibrations in the stone floor, the scent of ozone from a distant energy conduit, the low hum of the planet's core. She was whole again. She placed the remainder of the fruit back on the table and turned to face Aiden, her eyes now holding the same profound depth as his. "Now," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "tell me about these issues." He gestured for her to take her seat at the great desk. He sat beside her, and with a wave of his hand, the smooth marble surface in front of them shimmered and came to life. It was a holographic interface, displaying complex geological maps, data streams, and security protocols. "We've had incursions," he said, his tone hardening. 3 of them in the last 2 months. Small, but sophisticated. Someone from the upper world is trying to hack our network. Persephone leaned forward, studying the data. "Hack? You mean a digital attack?" "More than that. They're trying to find physical access points. The old ways. Places where the barrier between our worlds is thin. They're using a mix of high technology and something else. Something older." He pointed to a location on the holographic map, a remote area in the Louisiana bayou. "The last breach attempt was here. They tried to use some kind of sonic resonance to force open a fissure. Were they successful? No. Our defenses held. But they're getting smarter, more persistent. They're looking for something. Or someone." His eyes met hers, and a flicker of something protective and fierce passed through them. Persephone felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underworld's temperature. Her double life was a carefully balanced secret. If anyone from the surface discovered this world, or worse, discovered her connection to it, the consequences would be catastrophic. For her mother, for Aiden, for the stability of both realms. "Do we know who they are?" she asked. "Not yet. The energy signature is masked. The digital footprint is ghosted. It's professional. Extremely well-funded." He zoomed in on a fragment of corrupted code left behind during the attack. It was elegant, complex, and utterly alien. "Whoever they are, they don't know the full truth, I'm sure of it. They're likely hunting for resources, for the source of Plutus Group's impossible success. They think they're chasing corporate secrets. But if they keep pushing," Persephone finished his thought, "they might find a mythological one instead." "Exactly." He shut the display off with another wave of his hand, and the marble returned to its inert state. I've tripled the patrols and hardened the firewalls at all known access points, but I've been waiting for you. Your insight is different. You understand the surface. Their motivations. Their greed. She nodded, her mind already shifting from the creative challenges of floral design to the strategic necessities of protecting a kingdom. It was a familiar transition. I'll start reviewing the security logs immediately. We need to analyze their methods, predict their next target. Aiden watched her, a hint of a smile returning to his lips. I've missed my partner, he said, his voice softer now. The queen has returned to her throne. He stood and walked over to her, gently taking her hand and helping her to her feet. For a moment, the immense pressure of their duties faded, and it was just the two of them in the heart of their silent, beautiful kingdom. He was the only one who saw all of her, both the creator of life and the ruler of the dark. The darkness, he said quietly, his thumb brushing against her knuckles, is less absolute when you are here. Hours bled into one another in the timeless expanse of the underworld. For Persephone, the process of reacclimation was always a disorienting blend of the familiar and the forgotten. Seated beside Aiden at the marble command desk, she plunged into the cold, hard data of the security breaches. Streams of code, energy schematics, and geological resonance charts flowed across the holographic interface. It was Aiden's native language, a world of logic, patterns, and quantifiable facts. He moved through the data with the effortless grace of a shark in the deep ocean. Persephone, however, felt like she was reading a book with half the pages missing. She could understand the information, but she couldn't feel the intent behind it. The data showed what the intruders did, but it couldn't explain the subtle nuances of why, beyond a generic lust for resources. The surface world wasn't driven by pure logic. It was a chaotic tapestry of ambition, fear, and desperate hope. That was the context the data streams lacked. Anything. Aiden's voice cut through her concentration. He had been cross-referencing the attack vectors with a global map of Plutus Group's publicly known assets, looking for a pattern. They're brute-forcing the resonance frequencies, she said, tracing a finger over a complex waveform analysis. It's like they have a key, but they don't know which lock it fits, so they're just banging on every door in the hallway. It's loud, clumsy, but effective enough to get our attention, Aiden countered. They are testing, learning with each attempt. Their next one will be more precise. Frustration pricked at her. She stood up, the chair gliding silently behind her. I need to walk. Staring at code is making my eyes ache. Aiden didn't object. He understood her need for a different kind of sensory input. The grove has missed its keeper, he said, his eyes softening as he looked at her. Leaving Aiden to his world of data, Persephone walked from the command center, her path taking her away from the administrative and industrial heart of the kingdom. She crossed a narrow bridge of spun silver that arched over the river of molten metal, the heat a pleasant warmth against her skin. The air began to change, losing its sharp, mineral edge and taking on the scent of damp moss, cool water, and something else, a faint, clean fragrance like petrichor after a desert rain. She was heading to her personal domain, her sanctum, the one place in this entire vast kingdom of stone and shadow that was purely hers. The entrance was a simple, unadorned archway that opened into a cavern of staggering beauty. This was the Elysian Grove, Persephone's garden. There was no sun here, but the cavern was filled with a soft, multi-hued light. It emanated from the flora itself. Carpets of glimmer moss pulsed with a gentle blue light. Crystalline flowers, which she called quartz blossoms, grew in spiraling clusters, their facets catching and refracting the light from the moss into tiny, shifting rainbows. And in the center of the cavern grew the heartwood, a tree-like formation of what looked like white, porous stone, with veins of softly glowing rose-gold light pulsing through it like a slow, sleeping heart. It drew geothermal energy from deep within the earth and distributed it throughout the grove, the lifeblood of this impossible garden. This was her work, her art, in the underworld. She had cultivated this place from a single glowing spore she'd found in the deepest, most ancient part of the realm. It was a testament to the fact that life, in some form, could thrive anywhere. As she stepped into the grove, a figure emerged from behind a thicket of glowing lantern reeds. It was Dr. Elena Kane, the head of xenogeology and the closest thing the underworld had to a botanist. A sharp woman with piercing gray eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun, Kane was one of the few echoes who had chosen to retain a distinct, stable form, a testament to her singular focus and value to the kingdom. My queen, Dr. Kane said, her voice a respectful, business-like tone. I was hoping you would come soon. She held a lead-lined container in her hands. What is it, Elena? Persephone asked, already sensing a dissonance in her garden's placid energy. It's the whisper vine from Sector Gamma 7, near the old Mississippi fault line access point, Kane explained, opening the container. Inside, nestled on a black velvet cloth, was a cutting of a plant that normally glowed with a soft, silver light. Now, its light was faint and sputtering, and the delicate, bell-shaped flowers were curled and brown at the edges. The entire patch is failing. We've checked the geothermal feed, nutrient levels, everything is optimal. It's sick. And we don't know why. Persephone took the container, her expression serious. She gently lifted the dying vine. As soon as her fingers touched it, she felt it. A faint, high-frequency vibration, a deep-seated wrongness in its cellular structure. It felt like a string on a violin that had been tightened almost to its breaking point. It was screaming in a way that no scientific instrument could measure. This was the site of the most recent breach attempt, Persephone stated, not as a question. Yes, my queen, Cain confirmed. The sonic resonance attack. The geological sensors registered it, but we detected no lasting environmental damage. Your sensors only measure the rock, Persephone murmured, closing her eyes and focusing. She followed the feeling, the painful resonance within the plant, tracing it back in her mind to the data she had been staring at just an hour ago. The intruder's clumsy, brute force sonic frequencies. They hadn't just been knocking on a physical door. They had been shouting a discordant, harmful note into the delicate, balanced ecosystem of the deep earth. Her eyes snapped open, a spark of understanding within them. They think the earth is a dead thing, she whispered. A machine to be manipulated. They don't understand that it's alive. This vine, it's not sick. It's poisoned. By a sound. She turned to Cain, her mind racing. Elena, I need you to bring me the full resonance signature from the Gamma 7 attack. Not the filtered data, the raw, chaotic source file. At once, my queen. The scientist nodded and departed with swift efficiency. Persephone looked from the dying vine in her hand to the vibrant, living light of her garden. Aiden was trying to fight a digital threat with digital defenses. But the intruders were using a hybrid of technology and raw, elemental force. He was trying to build a better firewall. She realized they needed a different kind of weapon entirely. When she returned to the command center, Aiden was still deep in the data. She walked up to the desk and laid the wilting whisper vine beside his hand. He looked at it, then at her face. Their weapon is not precise, she said, her voice filled with a new, cold certainty. It's a sonic sledgehammer. They are causing collateral damage to the life that exists down here, life they don't even know they're touching. Aiden's eyes narrowed as he finally understood. And that gives us an advantage. A huge one, she confirmed. They're trying to imitate the resonant frequency of a dormant fault line to pry it open. But their imitation is flawed. It's like a bad cover of a song, hitting all the wrong notes. It's those wrong notes that are killing the whisper vine. She looked at him, her plan forming. You've been trying to build walls to keep them out. Let's open a door instead. Let's sing a song back to them. A frequency that's so alluring, so close to what they're looking for, that they can't resist following it. We can lead them into a trap. Aiden stared at her, a slow look of profound admiration spreading across his face. He was the king, the master strategist of this domain of rock and power. But she was its heart, the one who understood its life. Together, they were whole. A siren's call, he said, a dangerous smile touching his lips. And where will you lead them? To the quietest, most stable, and most heavily fortified cavern in the entire kingdom, Persephone replied, her eyes gleaming with the reflected light of the molten river. My garden will be the bait. The moment the decision was made, a palpable shift occurred in the underworld. The calm, administrative hum of the command center gave way to a focused, razor-sharp intensity. It was the feeling of a colossal machine waking from slumber, its gears locking into place for a single, unified purpose. Aiden was in his element. He stood before the holographic interface, no longer a quiet king but a master strategist commanding his legions. His voice was calm, but it carried an authority that resonated through the very stone of the chamber. Dr. Cain, he began, his eyes fixed on a schematic of the Elysian Grove. Work with Persephone. I want the lure frequency to be perfect, irresistible, but with a subtle undertone of instability. Make them think they've found a reactor core that's slightly volatile. They'll be too eager to question it. Understood, my king, Cain's voice replied from a communications panel. Michael, Aiden continued, addressing the silent figure who had escorted Persephone from the surface. Deploy the Stygian wardens to the Phlegathon perimeter. Full cloaking protocols. No energy signatures, no heat, no sound. I want them to be ghosts until I give the word. The target is containment, not elimination. We need to know who sent them. A nod was Michael's only reply before he melted back into the shadows. The Stygian Wardens were Aiden's elite guard, entities drawn from the most disciplined and focused echoes. They were armed not with conventional weapons, but with devices that could manipulate gravity and energy, capable of encasing intruders in impenetrable fields of force without firing a single shot. While Aiden marshaled his technological and military might, Persephone returned to her garden. Her task was more art than science. The trap's success didn't just depend on the right frequency, but on the right performance. She needed to make the grove feel like the prize the intruders were seeking. She walked to the center of the cavern and placed both hands on the smooth, warm surface of the heartwood. Closing her eyes, she shut out the world and listened. She listened past the silence, past the soft hum of the grove, to the deep, resonant pulse of the earth itself. It was the planet's own song, a melody of unimaginable age and power. The intruders had tried to mimic a single, crude note. She was about to compose a symphony. She began to hum, a low, quiet note that was less a sound and more a vibration. She fed her own energy into the heartwood, shaping the geothermal power it drew from the core. She guided it, nudged it, coaxing it to change its resonant output. It was like tuning a celestial instrument. The glimmer moss on the cavern floor brightened, its blue light intensifying. The quartz blossoms began to vibrate, their crystalline petals emitting a high, faint chime that harmonized with her hum. Under her direction, the entire grove began to sing the siren's call. It was a song of immense, raw power, of untapped energy, of a secret waiting to be claimed. It was a lie, beautifully told. Above, Louisiana Bayou. Night. Inside the cramped, humid confines of a disguised mobile command center, a young technician named Jenna stared at her screen, her eyes wide. "Silas, you need to see this," she breathed, her voice tight with disbelief. Silas, a man in his late 40s with a military bearing and the weary eyes of someone who had chased shadows for too long, moved to her station. On the screen, a topographical map of the area was dominated by a blooming, pulsing energy signature. Where before there had been faint, flickering signals, there was now a beacon. It was pure, powerful, and unbelievably stable. "What am I looking at?" Silas asked, his voice a low growl. "It's the motherlode," Jenna said, her fingers flying across her keyboard, running diagnostics. "The primary power source for Plutus Group's entire subterranean network. It has to be. The resonance. It matches the profile we've been hunting, but it's 1,000 times stronger. Sir, it's like they just turned it on. Or it's a trap," a cautious third voice, belonging to a systems analyst named Ben, piped up from his own station. "It's too big to be a trap," Silas countered, his gaze locked on the pulsating icon. Greed and ambition warred with his natural caution. This was the discovery that would make his career, that would justify years of dead ends and ridicule. "They've made a mistake. A power surge, a system reset, whatever it is, they've exposed themselves. This is our window." He straightened up, his decision made. "Jenna, lock onto that frequency. Feed it to the drill's resonance tunneler. Ben, get the strike team ready. We're going in. Full stealth protocols. This is a simple data grab. We get in, plant our surveillance bug on the core, and get out before they can even react." He looked at the screen one last time. The energy signature seemed to call to him, a promise of unlocking the greatest corporate secret in modern history. He had no idea he was a moth, flying mesmerized towards a masterfully constructed flame. In the Underworld command center, a new icon appeared on the holographic map. It was a small, angry red, right at the perimeter of the Elysian Grove. "Breach detected," Dr. Kane's voice announced calmly from the comms. "The intruders have bypassed the primary geological strata. They followed the lure frequency perfectly. They are in the access tunnel." Persephone had rejoined Aiden. She stood beside him, her work in the garden done. They watched the red dot move steadily along a predetermined path on the map, a tunnel they had intentionally left as the path of least resistance. On a secondary screen, silent, infrared video feeds from the Stygian Warden's cloaked positions showed a team of 6 figures in advanced tactical gear moving cautiously through the rough-hewn tunnel. They carried strange, sophisticated equipment, their movements precise and professional. "They move with confidence," Persephone noted quietly. "They believe they are unseen. Pride is the surface world's most abundant resource," Aiden replied, his voice devoid of emotion. He watched the intruder's icon as it reached the threshold of the archway leading into the garden. "They're at the door." The lead figure on the video feed gestured for his team to halt. He pulled out a scanner, and even from the silent feed, they could see his posture change, a wave of awe and disbelief at the readings he was getting from the cavern beyond. He gave a thumbs up to his team. He thought he was about to step into a reactor chamber. The team moved through the archway, entering the breathtaking, glowing expanse of the Elysian Grove. For a moment, they simply stood, stunned by the impossible sight. On the command center map, their 6 life sign indicators were now clustered neatly inside the center of the cavern, right where Persephone wanted them. Aiden looked at Persephone. She gave a single, sharp nod. His hand rested on the control interface, his eyes cold and calm. He spoke a single phrase into the command network, a quiet death knell to the intruder's ambitions. Lock the gates. Spring the trap. Instantly, a slab of solid rock kilometers thick sealed the tunnel they had come through. Energy barriers shimmered into existence, cutting off every possible exit. On the video feed, the intruders whirled around in sudden panic as the archway vanished behind them. In the silent, beautiful garden, the soft, welcoming light from the quartz blossoms shifted, hardening into a brilliant, sterile white. And in the deep blue shadows between the glowing flora, the Stygian wardens began to move. The intruders' professionalism shattered the instant the archway vanished. One moment they were stepping into an impossible paradise of light, the next they were entombed. The soft, melodic chime of the quartz blossoms ceased, replaced by a deafening, profound silence. The welcoming glow of the garden hardened into a brilliant, interrogative glare. Report. Silas barked, his voice tight with alarm as he and his team spun around, weapons raised. Ben, what's our exit? Gone, sir. It's just solid rock. All scanners are dead. We're completely cut off. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at their discipline. They were blind, trapped a mile beneath the earth in a chamber that shouldn't exist, a chamber that was now actively hostile. From the glowing flora, shadows detached themselves. The Stygian wardens. They didn't run or shout, they glided forward, their forms seeming to warp and ripple, absorbing the harsh light. Hostiles! One of the intruders yelled, opening fire. His advanced plasma rifle discharged a bolt of searing blue energy. Before the bolt could travel 10 feet, it simply stopped. It hovered in midair for a second, fizzing and crackling, then collapsed in on itself with a soft pop, leaving behind nothing but the smell of ozone. One of the wardens raised a hand. The rifle in the intruder's grip crumpled like a soda can, crushed by an invisible gravitational force. The man cried out as his hands were mangled in the process. Before his cry could fully echo, a shimmering net of golden energy shot out from another warden, enveloping him and lifting him from his feet, where he hung suspended and unconscious. The fight, if it could be called that, was over in less than 30 seconds. The intruder's high-tech weaponry was utterly useless against the fundamental forces the wardens commanded. One by one, the 5 soldiers were disarmed and incapacitated with brutal, silent efficiency, each trapped in their own energy cocoon. Only Silas remained, his sidearm still in his hand, though he didn't raise it. He was a professional, and he knew when a situation had moved from a fight to a surrender. He stood his ground, his face a mask of grim resolve, as the silent, faceless wardens formed a circle around him. A section of the cavern wall, which had looked like solid, unbroken stone, shimmered and dissolved, revealing a dark passageway. From it, Aiden and Persephone emerged. The Stygian wardens turned in unison and knelt, a gesture of profound fealty. The light in the cavern seemed to dim around the perimeter and focus on the 2 figures, casting them in an aura of undeniable power. Aiden, in his dark, perfectly tailored suit, looked like a CEO ready for a hostile takeover. But it was Persephone who truly captured the intruder's terror. Her simple, elegant black dress seemed woven from shadows, and her eyes, which had held such warmth and life on the surface, now glowed with a cold, ancient light. The living garden pulsed in time with her presence. She was not just in a place of power, she was the power. They stopped before the last conscious intruder. Silas stared at them, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These were not corporate executives. This was something else entirely. You have trespassed in my domain, Aiden's voice was quiet, yet it filled the cavern, each word landing with the weight of a hammer blow. You have used a clumsy, violent key to knock on a door you should never have known existed. You will tell me who sent you. Silas clenched his jaw. I'm not telling you anything. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Aiden almost smiled. The sheer, predictable arrogance of it. On the contrary, he said smoothly. You are dealing with a man who owns the ground beneath your feet and everything in it. Your name is Silas Vance, former Army Ranger, dishonorably discharged. For the last 6 years, you have been the head of special projects for a shell corporation that doesn't legally exist. You have a wife in Baton Rouge who thinks you're an oil platform consultant. Shall I continue? Silas's blood ran cold. The color drained from his face. How? Information, Mr. Vance, is the true currency of the world. And I am its central bank, Aiden said. Now for the last time. Who do you work for? When Silas remained silent, his face locked in a mask of defiance, Aiden sighed softly. So be it. Aiden met his gaze, and for a terrifying moment, Silas felt as though his own mind was no longer his. He didn't see a probe or a device. He just felt a cold, overwhelming presence slide past his mental defenses as if they were unlocked doors. His memories, his secrets, his deepest fears, they were all laid bare, rifled through by an unseen hand. He saw a flash of his daughter's first birthday, felt the shame of his discharge, the thrill of his first successful mission. He was utterly, completely violated. The psychic intrusion lasted only a second, but it left him gasping, sweat beading on his forehead, his professional composure shattered into a million pieces. While Aiden focused on Silas, Persephone's gaze drifted over the incapacitated forms of the other soldiers. Her eyes, attuned to the details of life, noticed something the others had missed. On the collar of each soldier's tactical gear, just beneath the manufacturer's tag, was a tiny, embroidered logo. It was a simple, stark design, 3 concentric black circles with a single, vertical line striking through them. It was subtle, designed to be overlooked. Aiden, she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. He broke his connection with Silas, turning to her. She pointed a slender finger at the logo. That emblem. I don't recognize it. Aiden's gaze followed hers. He zoomed in on the image from one of the warden's optical feeds, projecting it onto the holographic interface that shimmered into existence in the air beside him. The logo was stark and unfamiliar. Access all databases, Aiden commanded the air. Cross-reference all known corporate, military, and paramilitary insignias. Surface and subsurface. The air was silent for a moment as an unimaginable amount of data was processed. Then, a single file expanded on the screen. The logo matched. Beside it, a name appeared in clean, block letters. Tartarus Holdings Incorporated. The name landed in the cavern with the force of a physical blow. Persephone felt a chill so deep it seemed to freeze the geothermal warmth of the grove. Aiden's expression, for the first time, lost its detached calm and hardened into something far more dangerous. This wasn't a surface corporation blindly stumbling into their world in search of resources. Tartarus was a name from the old stories. The deepest pit. The prison of the Titans. A rival, subterranean power, one thought to be dormant and sealed away for millennia. Aiden looked from the screen to Silas, who was now staring at them with dawning horror, finally realizing he was a pawn in a game far older and larger than he could ever have conceived. The king of the Underworld looked at his queen, and in their shared gaze was a grave, terrible understanding. The incursions, the sonic probes, the strike team, it wasn't a test. It was a message. This wasn't corporate espionage. It was a declaration of war. The name hung in the air of the Elysian Grove, a poison that tainted the very light. Tartarus Holdings Incorporated. It was a name that belonged to an age of chaos and myth, now twisted into the chillingly modern form of a corporate entity. The immediate aftermath was one of profound, disciplined silence. Michael, Aiden's voice was low and cold, cutting through the silence. Take our guests to the vaults. I want Mr. Vance isolated and prepped for a full cognitive extraction. The others are to be kept in stasis. Find out everything they know. Who they report to, their operational structure, their next objective. Everything. The silent warden, Michael, bowed his head. He and the other wardens moved with fluid grace, levitating the unconscious forms of the intruders and escorting the now catatonic Silas Vance out of the grove. The shimmering wall reformed behind them, leaving Persephone and Aiden alone amidst the suddenly too bright, too quiet garden. With a wave of her hand, Persephone began to heal her domain. The harsh, white light softened back into a gentle, multi-hued glow. The crushed and disturbed crystalline plants slowly began to reform, their inner light returning. But the sense of violation lingered. Her sanctuary had been turned into a battlefield, her siren's call answered by a declaration of war. I have never heard you speak that name, she said, her voice barely a whisper as she turned to face him. In all my cycles, in all our time together. Aiden's face was grim, carved from stone. Because it was a name meant to be forgotten, buried. A closed chapter in a book I had hoped never to reopen. They walked back to the command center, the weight of this new reality settling heavily upon them. The vast chamber, usually a symbol of control and order, now felt like the calm eye of a gathering hurricane. Tartarus isn't a place, not anymore, Aiden began, bringing up a star chart on the holographic display. But instead of galaxies, it showed a complex web of interconnected realms and power structures. At the very bottom, isolated and circled in red, was a dark sphere labeled THI. In the beginning, he explained, his voice taking on the quality of a historian recounting a dark age, there were primordial forces. Raw, chaotic, untamable. My predecessors, the ones who first brought order to this realm, could not destroy them. So they imprisoned them. They built a cage out of fundamental laws and impenetrable geology. That cage was called Tartarus. It wasn't just a prison for beings, Persephone. It was a prison for concepts, endless ambition, cosmic entropy, pure, unadulterated chaos. He gestured to the screen. For millennia, it was dormant, a sealed tomb. But someone, something, has found a way to not only open it but to organize it, to give it structure. They've turned a prison into a corporation, a rival power. Persephone stared at the dark sphere on the map, a cold dread seeping into her bones. This was a threat on a scale she had never imagined. Who is leading them? That is the question that will define the coming age, Aiden admitted. The cognitive probe of Vance's mind was inconclusive. His knowledge ended with a series of numbered accounts and encrypted dead drops. He reported to a handler, who reported to another. The leadership of Tartarus is a ghost. They call their leader only the chairman. Persephone wrapped her arms around herself. Her mind, always the bridge between two worlds, was already calculating the potential devastation. Aiden, if there is a war down here, a true war between primordial powers, what will happen to the surface? He turned to face her, his stormy eyes reflecting her own deep concern. The balance will be broken. The geological stability I maintain, the geothermal vents I keep in check, the tectonic plates I soothe, all of it would be jeopardized. Earthquakes, volcanoes, a new dark age. Plutus Group controls the world's precious metals and resources from below. A hostile takeover would mean the complete collapse of the world's economies. They would not be conquering a kingdom. They would be shattering a planet. Now she understood the true stakes. This was not just a fight for his throne. It was a fight for the world she loved, the world of sun and rain and life. They made a mistake coming here, she said, her voice now firm, her fear solidifying into resolve. They came into my garden. They used my song against me. I will not let this stand. Aiden saw the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. She was not just the goddess of spring, she was also the dreaded queen of the underworld. And her fury was a thing to be feared. Nor will I, he agreed. We have been reactive for too long. It is time to go on the offensive. But first, we must prepare our house for war. He turned to the main console, his hands moving with renewed purpose. The time for secrets is over. I cannot fight this alone. With a single, spoken command, he sent out a summons. Convene the triumvirate. Emergency council. My office. Now. The triumvirate? Persephone asked. My 3 chief directors, Aiden explained. The pillars upon which this kingdom is built. They have managed the operations of this realm for centuries. They must be told. They stood in silence, waiting. Within minutes, 3 figures entered the command center. They were echoes, like Dr. Kane, but of a much higher order, their forms stable and imbued with an aura of immense authority. The first was General Radner, head of security and warden of the vaults. He was built like a mountain, his form clad in what looked like polished basalt, his presence radiating discipline and unyielding strength. The second was Director Miles, head of logistics. He was slender and robed, his face a mask of cold, analytical neutrality. He saw the underworld not as a kingdom, but as a vast, complex machine, and it was his job to ensure every gear turned in perfect harmony. The third was Mr. Aiden, head of operations, the one who managed the endless flow of echoes and the processing of their consciousness. He was the most ethereal of the 3, his form shifting slightly, his eyes holding the wisdom of countless lifetimes. They stopped before Aiden and Persephone and bowed in unison. My king, my queen, General Radner's voice was like grinding stones. You summoned us. Aiden looked at his 3 most trusted commanders, the queen of his realm standing resolute by his side. The pieces were on the board. The enemy had been revealed. Gentlemen, Aiden said, his voice resonating with grim purpose as he gestured to the dark sphere on the holographic map. A hostile bid has been made for this company. For our world. For the first time in millennia, the underworld is preparing for a civil war. The declaration settled in the command center, not with a crash, but with the profound, suffocating weight of a tombstone being lowered into place. The triumvirate, beings who had witnessed epochs turn to dust, stood motionless, processing a threat they had considered long extinct. It was General Radner who spoke first, his voice a low rumble of shifting tectonic plates. Tartarus, freed? How is this possible? The old locks were absolute. The locks were built in a different age, General, Aiden replied, his gaze sweeping over his commanders. Our enemy has had millennia to study the keys. They have adapted. They have incorporated. They now operate as we do, with structure and purpose, under the banner of Tartarus Holdings. He and Persephone quickly summarized the events, the escalating incursions, the sophisticated blend of technology and resonance magic used by the intruders, and the capture of Silas Vance's team. Persephone projected the image of the triple circle logo for them to see. Director Miles, the logician, stared at the symbol, his slender form betraying a flicker of agitation. A corporation, he mused, the words tasting like ash. Chaos has incorporated. They have a board of directors, no doubt. A mission statement. It is an obscene parody of order. It is a brilliant strategy, Persephone corrected him, her voice drawing the attention of all three ancient beings. They looked at her, their expressions a mixture of respect for their queen and uncertainty. She was, to them, still a relative newcomer, a creature tied to the sun and seasons. Don't dismiss them as a parody, she warned. Their greatest strength is that they understand a world you have long since forgotten, the surface. They didn't send shades or mythical beasts to test our defenses. They sent a team of highly trained, technologically equipped human mercenaries. She stepped forward, her presence commanding. They are operating up there, in my world. They are using human greed, ambition, and ingenuity as their weapons. They understand that the barrier between our realms is no longer just geological. It's technological, it's economic, it's informational. This isn't just a war for the underworld, gentlemen. The opening battles are being fought on the streets of New York, in the boardrooms of London, and in the data havens of Singapore. A heavy silence followed her words. She had reframed the entire conflict, moving it from an ancient, mythological struggle to a terrifyingly modern war on two fronts. Mr. Aiden, the keeper of memories, was the first to grasp the full implication. The collective consciousness. He whispered. The memories of the newly dead. They could be mining them for intelligence. 4 weaknesses in the upper world's infrastructure. 4 leverage. Precisely, Aiden affirmed, giving Persephone a look of profound gratitude. Which is why we will fight them on both fronts. He turned to his commanders, his voice leaving no room for debate. General Radner, you will place the entire kingdom on high alert. Double the warden patrols at every known nexus. I want the vaults where Vance is being held to be impenetrable. Begin the cognitive extraction immediately. I want to know everything, from his childhood pet to the face of the chairman. Your priority is defense and hard intelligence. The general nodded sharply. It will be done. Director Miles, Aiden continued, turning to the logician. You will conduct a full audit of our strategic reserves. Energy, raw materials, armaments. I want projections for a conflict lasting 1 year, 5 years, a decade. The age of peace is over. The age of abundance is suspended. Our entire operation is now geared for war. Miles's analytical mind was already calculating. The resource allocation will be significant, but manageable. Finally, Mr. Aiden said, his gaze meeting the shifting eyes of the operations head. Your task is the most delicate. The psychic shockwaves of this conflict could destabilize the Echo network, reinforce the protocols that ensure their stability. Beyond that, you will begin the Great Search. I want you to sift through every memory, every fragment of consciousness that has entered this realm for the last 3 millennia. Look for any mention of Tartarus, any whisper of the chairman, any sign of their activity. They have been planning this for centuries. They must have left a footprint somewhere. Aemon bowed his head. The archive of souls will be opened. The orders were given. The machine of the underworld was turning towards war. Yet, Persephone sensed a subtle friction. In the eyes of the triumvirate, she was still an outsider, a variable they hadn't fully accounted for. My king, Director Miles said carefully, the Queen's insights are valuable, but her connection to the surface, her necessary departures, it is a vulnerability our enemy is now clearly aware of. We must consider the security implications. Before Aiden could speak, Persephone answered herself, her voice as cold and clear as ice. You are correct, Director. It is a vulnerability. It is also our greatest asset. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm the only one in this room who can walk the streets of our enemy's recruiting ground and not be noticed. I understand their motivations. While you are all preparing to defend the castle walls, I will be identifying the enemy spies living within the city. Do not mistake my connection to the light as a weakness. A shadow is only cast when there is a light to stand against. Aiden placed a hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture that was an undeniable display of a united front. The Queen's Counsel is not a suggestion. It is a cornerstone of our strategy. She will be our eyes on the surface. We are in agreement." The triumvirate bowed, any hint of dissent erased by their king's absolute authority. They filed out of the command center, leaving Aiden and Persephone alone once more. The silence that remained was heavy with unspoken fears. "They are right to be concerned," Persephone said quietly, her resolve momentarily giving way to a flicker of dread. "They are right to be cautious," Aiden corrected her gently. "But they are wrong to see you as a liability. You are the key." "But Aiden," she said, turning to face him, her eyes wide with a terrifying new thought. "My time here, it's ending. In a few months, I am meant to return. To become Cora again. Before, it was a secret. Now, it's a risk. If Tartarus is watching the surface, they won't be looking for a goddess. They'll be looking for a floral artist in Manhattan. My life up there, my mother, everything I love is now a target." The cycle that had defined her existence, the double life she had carefully maintained, was no longer a secret pact. It was a strategic flaw in a celestial war, and her next descent into the sunlit world would not be a return to freedom, but a walk into the crosshairs of an enemy as old and as dark as the earth itself. The triumvirate was gone, but the gravity of their meeting remained, pressing down on the air in the command center. The strategic, kingdom-wide crisis had passed, leaving behind a sharper, more painful personal one. Persephone stood before the holographic map of the world, but she didn't see the continents and oceans. She saw a brownstone in the Upper East Side, a beloved face creased with worry, and a life of sunlight and laughter that was now a liability. "You cannot go back." Aiden's voice was soft, but it held the unyielding finality of a vault door swinging shut. He moved to stand beside her, his presence a fortress of shadow and concern. "That's not a choice you can make for me, Aiden," she replied, not looking at him. "It is a choice I must make for us," he insisted, his voice hardening slightly. "Persephone, listen to reason. They know about the cycle. They used human agents because they operate on the surface. Your life as Cora, your public profile, your mother, they are no longer secrets. They are pressure points. They are targets." He gestured around them, at the impenetrable walls and the hum of unimaginable power. "Here, you are safe. Here, you are a queen at the heart of her power. I can protect you. On the surface, you are a fragile, mortal woman. To let you go back now would be strategically insane. It would be untenable." Persephone finally turned to face him, and her eyes held not the soft glow of a goddess of spring, but the cold fire of a cornered queen. "And what would I be then? A prisoner? Your beloved captive, hidden away in a golden cage while the war for both our worlds rages on? I would be a symbol of your fear, not your strength." "I would be keeping you alive," he countered, his control fraying. The thought of her being in danger was a dissonance he could not tolerate. "You would be killing the part of me that is Cora," she shot back, her voice trembling with passion. "You would be letting Tartarus win. They wouldn't even have to land a blow. They would have successfully destroyed half of my existence, simply by revealing their name. I will not hide from them, Aiden. I will not be erased." They stood in a tense standoff, two immovable forces locked in a battle of love and logic. He saw an unacceptable risk. She saw an unacceptable surrender. Seeing the unyielding resolve in his eyes, Persephone knew she couldn't win with emotion alone. She had to offer a better strategy. She took a deep breath, marshaling her thoughts. "You're thinking like a king, Aiden. Defend the castle. Protect the queen." "I'm thinking like a spy," she said, her tone shifting from emotional to analytical. "Hiding is a defensive move. It tells the enemy we're afraid. What if, instead of hiding Cora, we weaponize her?" Aiden's expression shifted from concern to intrigue. "Go on." "Tartarus Holdings is operating on the surface," she laid out, beginning to pace. "They're using shell corporations, hiring mercenaries. That means they have a footprint. They need money, influence, and access. Where do people seek those things in my world? In the circles I already move in. High finance, politics, the arts. They need to launder money, acquire technology, and recruit powerful people." She stopped and faced him, her plan solidifying. Cora, the celebrated floral artist, the darling of the Manhattan elite, has access to every gala, every fundraiser, every gallery opening. They won't be looking for a spy in plain sight. They'll be looking for a woman in hiding. If I go back, not as the reclusive artist who vanishes for 6 months, but as a more visible, more engaged social figure, I can become your eyes and ears. I can hunt them. It was a bold, terrifyingly dangerous plan, and Aiden's first instinct was to reject it. But he couldn't deny the strategic brilliance of it. Persephone was right. His triumvirate could search the memories of the dead for 1,000 years and never get the kind of real-time intelligence she could gather in one night at a charity auction. The risk. He started, but she cut him off. The risk is there whether I go or not, she insisted. The only difference is whether I am cowering in your basement or actively fighting on the front lines. But I can't do it alone. If I am to be your agent on the surface, I need support. Your support. What do you need? He asked, the question itself a concession. He was no longer trying to stop her. He was asking how to help. First, communication, she said, ticking the points off on her fingers. A secure line. Untraceable. Something that bridges the gap between a penthouse and a kingdom. Done, he said. Dr. Kane can engineer a quantum-entangled communicator. Instantaneous and utterly impossible to intercept. Second, resources. Cora is wealthy, but I may need access to deeper funds. To follow money trails, to acquire information. You will have a direct line to the Plutus treasury, he affirmed. It is limitless. Third, she said, her voice dropping slightly. Protection. Not an army. Not a squad of wardens that would give me away. One person. Someone who can blend in. A driver, a bodyguard. Someone who is more than they appear. Aiden considered this for a long moment, his mind sifting through his most trusted operatives. Then, he nodded. Michael, he said. He is silent. He is loyal. And I assure you, he is far more than a simple driver. He will be your shadow. The argument was over. A new, far more dangerous pact had been forged between them. She would return to the world of light, but not just as the bringer of spring. She would be the queen of the Underworld's most valuable and vulnerable asset. Aiden stepped forward and took her hands in his. They were cold. You understand what you are asking, he said, his voice heavy. Every person you speak to, every party you attend, every flower you arrange, it will all be part of a lie. Your life up there will no longer be a sanctuary. It stopped being a sanctuary the moment Tartarus wrote their name on a uniform, she replied, her gaze steady and resolved. Sanctuaries are for times of peace, Aiden. This is a time of war. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly, a silent acknowledgement of the immense burden she was taking on, and the terrible fear he felt in letting her go. The queen of the Underworld was preparing for her annual return to the sun. But this time, she wouldn't be packing floral dresses and sandals. She would be packing a quantum communicator, a limitless bank account, and a web of calculated lies. Cora Summer, the artist, was about to become a spy. The decision to turn Cora into a weapon transformed the atmosphere of the Underworld. The grim weight of war remained, but it was now laced with the sharp, electric hum of a planned counteroffensive. The days leading up to Persephone's scheduled departure were not spent in quiet reflection, but in the meticulous arming of a queen for a new kind of battlefield. Aiden escorted her to a sector of the kingdom she rarely visited, the labs of Dr. Elena Kane. Unlike the organic living light of the Elysian Grove, this cavern was a sterile, brilliant white, filled with humming machinery and holographic displays showing complex molecular structures and energy waveforms. It was the scientific heart of the Plutus Group, where myth and quantum mechanics were treated as interchangeable disciplines. My queen, Dr. Kane said, her usual business-like tone tinged with excitement. She gestured towards a velvet-lined case on a steel table. As requested by the king. Your communication line. Inside the case, nestled on the black velvet, were not a phone or a complex device, but a pair of simple, exquisitely cut diamond stud earrings. They caught the lab's sterile light and fractured it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. They were beautiful, elegant, and perfectly innocuous. They're earrings, Persephone said, slightly taken aback. They are a matched pair of quantum-entangled nodes, Kane corrected her, a hint of pride in her voice. Each contains a single, stabilized particle, perfectly and irrevocably linked to its twin, which will remain here with us. They do not send a signal. A signal can be intercepted. Instead, we manipulate the spin of our particle, and yours responds instantly, regardless of distance or any intervening matter. It's not communication, it's a shared state of being. The universe is the only line they need. Kane explained how to use them. A light touch to the right earring would open a silent, subvocal channel directly to Aiden. A touch to the left would activate its secondary function, an ambient energy sensor. It will feel like a faint warmth against your skin if it detects any non-human energy signatures or significant resonance anomalies nearby, Kane finished. A personal early warning system. Persephone picked them up. They were cool and heavy in her palm, a tangible link to the kingdom she was about to leave. Next, Director Miles arrived, his form gliding silently into the lab. He presented her not with a ledger or a key, but with a single, slim card made of polished, unmarked obsidian. It had no numbers, no name, no chip. To the world's financial systems, this card is an anomaly that their computers are programmed to accept without question, Miles explained, his voice dry as ever. It is not tied to a bank. It is tied to a vault. Its resources are, for all intents and purposes, infinite. Use it to open any door that money can unlock. The final piece of her arsenal was the most important. In a private chamber, Aiden briefed Michael in her presence. For the first time, Aiden spoke of his silent companion's true nature. Michael is one of the original wardens, Aiden explained, his hand on Michael's shoulder. He is bound by oaths older than any nation on the surface. He will be your chauffeur, your security detail, your shadow. He cannot be bribed, he cannot be threatened, and I assure you, he cannot be beaten. His senses are not limited to sight and sound. He will feel a threat long before it materializes. You are to trust his instincts as you would trust my own. Throughout the briefing, Michael simply stood, his gaze fixed forward, his presence as solid and reassuring as the bedrock of the world. He gave Persephone a single, brief nod. It was all the confirmation she needed. Her final night in the underworld was quiet. She stood before the two sides of her closet, a general reviewing her armory. The bright, floral print dresses and cheerful colors of Cora's wardrobe looked impossibly naive, a costume from a play whose story had taken a dark, unexpected turn. She didn't pack them away with sadness, but with a cold, methodical precision. Each dress, each pair of shoes, was now a calculated part of a disguise. Before she left, Aiden gave her a final briefing in the command center. Your first objective is simple. Re-establish your life as Cora, he instructed, a map of Manhattan society appearing on the holographic display. Do not go looking for Tartarus. Let them find you. We know they are drawn to power and influence. Your first stop should be the Metropolitan Museum's Acquisitions Gala. It's a nexus point for old money, new technology, and political ambition. A perfect hunting ground. He looked at her, his kingly facade falling away for a moment to reveal the deep-seated fear beneath. Listen for whispers. Look for the people and companies that don't fit. And Persephone, he added, his voice dropping. At the first sign of danger, the very first sign, you use the earring. Do not be brave. Be smart. Come home. I will, she promised. The ascent in the private elevator was the reverse of her journey months ago, but the feeling was profoundly different. Then, she had been shedding a skin, descending into her true power. Now, she was putting on a mask, ascending into the most dangerous territory she had ever known. The elevator chimed softly, and the door slid open, revealing her sun-drenched Manhattan penthouse. The air smelled of dust and dormant plants, a space waiting for its mistress to return and bring it back to life. She walked to the ornate mirror in her foyer and looked at her reflection. She saw Cora Summer, her face a little paler, her eyes a little older. She reached up and fastened the diamond earrings in her ears. They felt both impossibly heavy with the weight of her mission and reassuringly solid. She took one deep breath, the queen of the underworld inhaling the air of her new battlefield. The hunt had begun. The first breath of surface air was always a shock. After 6 months of the cool, still, mineral-scented atmosphere of the underworld, the air in her Manhattan penthouse felt chaotic, thick with humidity, sunlight, and the million disparate scents of a living city. For a full minute, Persephone stood motionless in her foyer, letting the sensations wash over her, recalibrating her entire being to the world of light. This was no longer just a homecoming. It was an infiltration. Her first day was a carefully executed ritual of resurrection. She opened the heavy drapes, flooding the apartment with a brilliant, almost painful September sun. She watered her dormant plants, her touch coaxing the first hints of life back into their sleeping leaves. She powered on her devices, watching them flood with 6 months of missed emails, social updates, and news alerts. It was a digital ghost, the life of Cora Summer, waiting for its host to return. The most difficult part was the call to her mother. She rehearsed the lies in her head before dialing, the excuses feeling flimsy and thin. Cora, darling. Oh, thank God. Senator Diana Meter's voice was a torrent of relief and worry. I was a day away from filing a missing persons report. Where have you been? I'm sorry, Mom, Persephone said, the apology feeling more real than the excuse that followed. I just needed to get away. I went to a silent retreat upstate. No phones, no internet. I needed to clear my head for the new season's collection. You know how I get. It was the story they had always used, the one her mother had reluctantly come to accept as part of her daughter's artistic temperament. I worry, sweetheart. This seasonal melancholy of yours seems to get longer every year, Diana sighed. But I'm just glad you're back. Are you going to the Met Acquisitions Gala on Friday? Everyone has been asking about you. It would be a good way to show the world you haven't vanished. I wouldn't miss it, Persephone said, the words a perfect blend of social obligation and strategic intent. The hunt was already calling to her. Friday night arrived with the electric buzz of a New York society event. As she stood before her mirror, Persephone felt the profound duality of her existence. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that shimmered like a serpent's skin in the light. It was elegant, eye-catching, but offered the freedom of movement she might need. Her hair was swept up, revealing the simple, deadly diamonds in her ears. She was applying the mask of Cora Summer, the enigmatic artist. But underneath, the mind of Persephone, the queen and strategist, was cold and focused. Michael was waiting for her downstairs in a black town car that was as sleek and silent as he was. He opened the door for her without a word, his eyes scanning the street, seeing a world of threats she could only guess at. The short ride to the museum was a cocoon of underworld silence in the heart of the city's cacophony. "Stay on the perimeter," she instructed as they pulled up. "Keep the comms channel open but silent unless I activate it. I'm going hunting." Michael gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The inside of the Metropolitan Museum was a glittering jungle. The flash of camera bulbs, the murmur of 100 conversations about art, money, and power, and the scent of expensive perfume hung in the air. Persephone stepped into it, and the performance began. "Cora, you're back," a gallery owner exclaimed, kissing the air by her cheeks. "We missed you, darling." "Your flowers at last season's gala were all anyone could talk about," a fashion designer gushed. She smiled, she laughed, she accepted champagne. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, a shark gliding through a glittering reef. She wasn't listening to the gossip, she was listening for anomalies, watching for the faces that didn't belong to the established hierarchy of this world. An hour into the event, as she was discussing a new sculpture with a curator, it happened. A faint, distinct warmth bloomed against the skin of her left earlobe. It wasn't painful, just a clear, undeniable signal from the earring. A non-human energy signature was nearby. She casually turned her head, scanning the group of people standing a few feet away. They were senators, tech billionaires, old money matriarchs. And in the center of them, holding their rapt attention, was a man she had never seen before. He was impeccably handsome in a tailored tuxedo, with dark, slicked-back hair and eyes so dark they seemed to drink the light. He laughed at something one of the senators said, a flash of brilliant white teeth. He was charm personified. "Who is that?" Persephone asked the curator, nodding subtly in the man's direction. "Oh, that's Julian Thorne," the curator whispered, a hint of awe in his voice. "He's the new king of Wall Street. His investment firm, Argent Ventures, came out of nowhere 6 months ago and has already outperformed everyone. They say he has a golden touch. He hasn't made a single bad investment. 6 months ago. The timing was too perfect." Persephone excused herself and began to subtly maneuver through the crowd, circling his group. As she got closer, the warmth in her earring intensified. It was him. She waited for a break in his conversation, then approached, holding her champagne flute like a shield. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Cora Summer. I don't believe we've been introduced." Julian Thorne turned, and his charismatic smile washed over her. It was a dazzling practice thing, but his eyes were ancient and cold. "Ms. Summer, the pleasure is all mine. I'm an immense admirer of your work. You have a unique gift for coaxing life into places of stone and glass." The compliment was too precise, too pointed. "Thank you," she said, her heart beating a little faster. "And I've been hearing whispers about your own gifts, Mr. Thorne. Turning data and capital into gold. One deals in beauty, the other in power," he said, his smile never wavering. "But at the end of the day, are they not the same thing? The ability to shape the world to one's will." He took a sip of his drink, his dark eyes appraising her over the rim of the glass. "Tell me, Ms. Summer, have you ever considered diversifying your portfolio? The Plutus Group has a stranglehold on the world's resources. A wise artist would look for emerging markets." It was a probe, a direct, calculated jab at Aiden's empire, disguised as financial advice. He was testing her. "I find it's best to stick to what you know," she replied coolly. "Flowers are much less complicated than markets. And far less treacherous." His smile widened, a silent acknowledgement of her parry. "Perhaps." Before she could press further, he was pulled away by a congressman. But as he left, his cold eyes met hers one last time, holding a look that was both a challenge and a warning. Later, in the silent, secure darkness of the town car, Persephone watched the glittering lights of Manhattan slide by. The gala had been a success. The enemy had a face and a name. She reached up and gently touched her right earring. The link opened, a silent bridge of thought and intent spanning the chasm between her world and Aiden's. "I'm back," she sent, the words forming in her mind. "And I think I've found one of them. His name is Julian Thorne." The silence in the town car was absolute, a pocket of the underworld moving through the heart of Manhattan. Persephone sat perfectly still, her consciousness stretched across the impossible distance separating her from Aiden. His response didn't come in words, but in a wave of cold, focused fury that washed over their quantum link. It was the mental equivalent of a kingdom preparing for battle. Julian Thorne, Aiden's thought finally came, sharp and clear as a shard of obsidian. Argent Ventures. The name is new. The corporate registry for the firm is less than a year old. It appeared from nothing and has absorbed assets at an impossible rate. We have been watching the company, but we did not have the face of the man behind it. You have given us a target, Persephone. He knew my name, she sent back, replaying the conversation in her mind. He referenced Plutus Group directly. It wasn't a guess, Aiden. It was a message. He was testing you, Aiden confirmed, his anger now tempered by strategic calm, and confirming that you were who they thought you were. They knew you would return. They were waiting for you. The gala was not just a hunting ground for you, but for them as well. The thought sent a chill down her spine. She had walked into that glittering hall as the predator, never considering she was also the prey. "What do you know about him?" she asked. The warmth from the earring was strong. "He's not human." There was a pause, a sense of immense processing on his end. "We are running his image through the archive of souls now, cross-referencing every memory, every historical record. It will take time. Whatever he is ancient, and he knows how to hide his tracks. For now, assume he is as dangerous as the chairman himself. Your objective has changed from surveillance to avoidance. Stay away from him." "He won't let me," Persephone countered. "He approached me for a reason. He's initiated contact. To pull away now would be a signal of fear. Then be a ghost," Aiden instructed. "Be present, but untouchable. You are Cora Summer, the artist. You are flighty, consumed by your work, hard to pin down. Use the mask not just to hide, but to deflect. I will begin digging into Argent Ventures from this end. We will dismantle his empire from the roots up. Your task is to stay safe and observe from a distance." The link closed, leaving her alone with the city lights and the silent presence of Michael. The warmth of the connection faded, replaced by the cold reality of her situation. She was a marked woman. The following days were a masterclass in controlled paranoia. Persephone threw herself back into the public life of Cora Summer, but with a new, sharp-edged awareness. She reopened her floral studio, taking on high-profile clients and filling her penthouse once more with the vibrant, chaotic beauty of living things. To the outside world, she was the brilliant artist returning from a reclusive sabbatical, more in demand than ever. But beneath the surface, everything was different. Each phone call was filtered through a layer of suspicion. Every new client was a potential threat. She would hold a perfect blood-red rose in her hand, admiring its beauty, while her mind was miles away, dissecting the hidden motives of the person who had ordered it. Her life had become a hall of mirrors, and she couldn't be sure which reflections were real. Her true work began at night. After the studio closed and the last staff member had left, she would retreat to her office, the diamond earrings a cool, steady presence against her skin. With the limitless resources of the obsidian card, she became a digital phantom. She didn't need to hack systems, she simply bought them. She acquired a controlling interest in a discreet private intelligence firm, tasking them with a single, obsessive objective: uncover everything about Julian Thorne and Argent Ventures. Reports began to trickle in, painting a picture that was both impressive and impossible. Argent Ventures had no history. Its capital seemed to materialize from nowhere, flowing through a labyrinth of offshore accounts and untraceable cryptocurrency transactions. Julian Thorne himself was a ghost. His public records, education, birth certificate, family history, were flawless, but they were also brand new, as if a fully formed man had been digitally born 1 year ago. He had no childhood friends, no old college photos, no past. One late night, staring at a screen filled with dead ends, she felt a familiar warmth in her left ear. It was faint, not the intense signal from the gala, but a persistent, low-grade hum. An anomaly. She stood and walked to her penthouse window, which overlooked the glittering expanse of Central Park. Across the park, in one of the impossibly expensive penthouses of a rival skyscraper, a single light was on. It was a corner office, its glass walls revealing the silhouette of a man standing in the dark, looking out. She couldn't see his face, but she didn't need to. He was looking in her direction. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that it was Julian Thorne. He had bought an apartment that gave him a direct line of sight into her life. The message was clear. "I see you." She didn't back away from the window. She didn't close the curtains. That would be an admission of fear. Instead, she stood her ground, a queen in her glass castle, and stared back into the darkness at the man who was her opposite. The silent, visual duel stretched across the city, a promise of the conflict to come. She touched her right earring, opening the channel to Aiden. "He's watching me," she sent, her voice calm in her mind. "He has an apartment across the park. He wants me to know he's there." Aiden's response was immediate and visceral. It was a wave of pure, possessive rage, the fury of a king whose queen was being threatened. "This changes things. The hunt is no longer passive." "I know," Persephone replied, her gaze still locked on the distant silhouette. "The ghost has to come out of the shadows. It's time to set a trap of my own." Aiden's fury over the quantum link was a gale force, a promise of retribution so profound it could crack mountains. "Give me the word, Persephone. A team of wardens can be on the surface in minutes. We will pull him apart, molecule by molecule." The offer was tempting, a visceral yearning to see her tormentor erased, but she reined in his rage and her own. "No, Aiden. A public display of our power is exactly what Tartarus wants. They want us to show our hand. We cannot win this with brute force. We must win it with cunning. What is your plan?" he asked, the anger receding into a tense, coiled stillness. "He's watching me, expecting me to be the frightened artist," she explained, her gaze fixed on the distant silent watcher in the skyscraper. "He thinks he is the spider, and I am the fly. I'm going to remind him that even flies have webs of their own. If he wants to observe me, I will give him a show he cannot possibly ignore." Her plan was simple, elegant, and breathtakingly audacious. She would use the very thing that defined her as Cora Summer, her art. She would create a masterpiece, a floral installation so unique, so impossible, that it would create a firestorm of intrigue in the circles of the elite. And at its center would be a piece of bait so alluring that Julian Thorne would have no choice but to move from his distant perch and come closer. "I need something from your garden," she told Aiden. "A seed. Something that carries the signature of our world, but can survive, with my help, in the thin, sunlit air of the surface." There was a long pause, the weight of her request hanging between them. She was asking him to risk a piece of their home, to expose a fragment of its true nature to their enemy. "Michael will bring it to you by morning," was his eventual solemn reply. The next day, Michael delivered a small, lead-lined box. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark soil, was a single obsidian black seed, no larger than a pomegranate aril. It seemed to absorb the light around it, cold to the touch. It was a seed from a nightshade orchid, a rare parasitic plant from the Elysian Grove that fed not on sunlight, but on ambient energy and emotion. For the next week, Persephone poured all of her focus and a significant portion of her own life force into cultivating the impossible seed. In a hidden, climate-controlled room within her studio, she nurtured it. It wouldn't grow with water and sunlight alone. It required her power. She would spend hours with her hands hovering over its pot, feeding it the dualistic energy that was uniquely hers, the vibrant, creative life force of spring, and the cold, quiet, immense power of the underworld. The process left her drained and pale, but the plant grew at an unnatural rate. It was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. It had no leaves, only a single thorny, black stem that coiled like a serpent. At its tip, a blossom unfurled, its petals the color of a starless midnight sky, their texture like crushed velvet. And within the petals was a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, as if it had swallowed the light of distant nebulae. She called it the Stygian bloom. The second phase of her plan was to build the stage. As Cora Summer, she began to leak information to her most influential clients and to contacts at exclusive art and design magazines. She spoke of a breakthrough, a new hybrid, her magnum opus. The buzz was immediate and intense. The reclusive artist who had just returned had created something unprecedented. Finally, she sent out 24 invitations, printed on heavy, black cardstock. They were for a private one-night-only viewing of The Stygian Bloom at her penthouse. The guest list was a meticulously curated who's who of New York's power elite, tech moguls, political figures, art collectors, and financial titans. Julian Thorne did not receive a direct invitation. Instead, an invitation was sent to a billionaire investor with whom Thorne had recently closed a major deal, with a polite note suggesting he bring his new, brilliant partner. It was an irresistible social and professional obligation. The day of the event, Persephone briefed Michael. He would not be a driver tonight, but part of the discreet catering staff, dressed in a simple black uniform. He would be her shadow, his eyes on Thorne from the moment he arrived. "He will not try anything here, not publicly," she told him. But he will be probing, testing. Watch his energy, not just his actions. Michael responded with his customary, silent nod. As evening fell, the penthouse was transformed. The lights were dimmed, and the regular floral arrangements were all in shades of white and cream, designed to make the single black flower in the center of the studio the undeniable focal point. Guests began to arrive, their voices a low murmur of awe and curiosity. They moved around the Stygic bloom, which sat under a single spotlight, its unnatural beauty drawing them in. Persephone played the role of the proud artist perfectly, accepting compliments and explaining the complex genetic engineering that had created the flower. All the while, her left earring was cold, the energy signatures of her human guests causing no reaction. She waited, her nerves stretched taut. Finally, the doorman announced the arrival of the billionaire investor. And with him, as she knew he would be, was Julian Thorne. He was even more striking than she remembered. He seemed to glide into the room, his dark eyes taking in everything at once. He saw the flower, and for a fraction of a second, his charming mask slipped. She saw a flash of pure, predatory hunger, an ancient recognition. Then the mask was back. He smiled, detached himself from his associate, and began to walk towards her through the crowded room. In his hand, he carried a single perfect, long-stemmed white rose. A stark contrast, a silent message, a challenge. The stage was set. The bait was taken. The serpent had entered her web. The ambient chatter of the party seemed to thin and recede as Julian Thorne approached, a predator moving with serene confidence through a herd of unsuspecting prey. The crowd parted for him naturally. He stopped before Persephone, the polite, charming smile never leaving his face, but his dark eyes held a chilling intensity. They were not the eyes of a man, but of an ancient, patient hunger. He extended the hand holding the single white rose. Its petals were flawless, a symbol of purity and light that felt like a profound mockery in his grasp. "Miss Summer," he said, his voice a low, melodious purr that was meant to be heard only by her. "A gift. For the artist who so masterfully understands the beauty of contrast. A little light to complement your magnificent shadow." It was a gauntlet, thrown down in the middle of her carefully constructed stage. He wasn't just acknowledging her Stygian bloom, he was acknowledging her. Persephone took the rose, her fingers deliberately brushing his. His skin was unnaturally cold. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice steady as she met his gaze. "Even the brightest flowers must draw their strength from roots buried deep in the darkness." She turned and placed his white rose in a slender silver vase next to her Stygian bloom. The two flowers, one of impossible light and one of impossible dark, stood in stark, silent opposition. A microcosm of a war. "Magnificent," Thorne breathed, stepping closer to the black flower, his eyes devouring it. The warmth in Persephone's left earring intensified into a distinct, pulsing heat. "It feels familiar, as if it wasn't merely grown, but remembered into existence. Tell me, Miss Summer, what other secrets does your private garden hold?" It was a direct probe into the source of her power. He was no longer speaking in code. "Every artist has their muse, Mr. Thorne," she said, moving to stand on the opposite side of the bloom, the impossible flower between them. "Some find inspiration in the sun, in the chaotic energy of life. Others, like myself, find it in the deep, quiet, stable places of the world. And you? Your success is just as miraculous as this flower. What forgotten places do you draw your inspiration from?" Thorne chuckled, a low, appreciative sound. "I'm merely a student of history. I believe that old, stagnant monopolies are unhealthy. The market craves disruption. When management becomes complacent, content with the status quo, a new, more ambitious leadership is required to step in and liberate dormant assets." Stagnant monopolies. Complacent management. He was talking about Aiden and his kingdom. Liberating dormant assets. He was talking about conquest. Persephone touched her right earring, a fleeting, almost unconscious gesture. A single, pure thought flashed across the quantum abyss to Aiden. He's boasting. He believes he has already won. "A hostile takeover is always a risky venture," she countered, her voice dropping to match his conspiratorial tone. "Especially when one doesn't understand the delicate ecosystem they intend to disrupt. Upset the roots, and the entire world above can wither and die." It was a warning, a reminder of the catastrophic consequences of the war he sought. Thorne's smile tightened. He had expected a flighty artist, perhaps a pampered princess. He had not expected a queen who would meet his threats with her own. "Ah, but that is the price of progress," he said smoothly. "Sometimes, the old world must be cleared away to make room for the new. A new chairman, a new board, a new era." He leaned closer, his voice dropping so low she could feel the vibration of it in the air. The current CEO, he's sentimental. Tied to old pacts, old promises. He values balance. My associates and I, we value profit. We value growth. And there is so much untapped potential, so much power, just sitting in the vaults. The heat in her earring flared, a sharp sting of warning. He was speaking of things no human could possibly know. This was not a spy. This was a true minister of Tartarus. He straightened up, his gaze leaving the flower to sweep across her magnificent penthouse, lingering on the photos of her with her mother, on the priceless art, on the life she had so carefully built. It is a beautiful, fragile thing you have here, Miss Summer, he said, his voice returning to a casual, conversational tone, but the menace beneath it was sharper than any knife. Your art, your reputation, your connections. It would be a terrible shame if a sudden, volatile shift in the market caused it all to fall apart. It was a direct threat, aimed at the heart of her other self. He wasn't just threatening the queen of the underworld, he was threatening Cora Summer. Before she could form a reply, the billionaire who had brought Thorne over clapped him on the shoulder. Julian! There you are! Senator Harrison wants a word about that energy deal. The spell was broken. Thorne gave Persephone a final, brilliant smile that did not reach his cold, ancient eyes. A pleasure, Ms. Summer. Truly, he said, and then he was gone, melting back into the glittering crowd as if he were just another guest. Persephone stood frozen for a moment, the white rose in its vase looking like a pale ghost beside the vibrant darkness of her own creation. The party buzzed around her, but she felt utterly alone. The game had changed. He had moved his pieces from the shadows of espionage to the harsh light of direct intimidation. Her life as Cora was no longer a disguise. It was now the battlefield itself. The last guest departed near midnight, leaving behind a penthouse that felt like a beautiful, hollow corpse. The air, thick with the ghosts of laughter and perfume, seemed to mock the profound silence that had fallen. Champagne flutes stood half-empty on tables, and the Stygian bloom, its purpose served, now seemed less like a masterpiece and more like a dark, ominous omen in the center of the room. Michael moved with his usual quiet efficiency, clearing away the remnants of the party, his presence a solid, grounding force in Persephone's turbulent thoughts. She didn't help him. She stood motionless by the window, her gaze fixed on the distant malevolent light in Julian Thorne's skyscraper. The duel was over, but the battlefield remained. His threat lingered, a poison seeping into the foundation of the life she had built. When the apartment was restored to its pristine order, she dismissed Michael for the night. Alone at last, she sank into a chair in her darkened office, the weight of her dual existence pressing down on her. She touched the diamond in her right ear. The connection to Aiden was instant, but this time she didn't just send a thought. She let him feel the raw, undiluted aftermath of the encounter. The cold dread, the chilling certainty of Thorne's threat, the violation of having her sanctuary turned into a cage. His response was a tidal wave of pure protective fury, so powerful it almost made her flinch. It's over. The experiment has failed. Michael will have you out of that city before sunrise. You are coming home, Persephone. Now, that is an order. The king of the underworld had spoken. But he was not speaking to a subject. No, she sent back, her own resolve hardening into a diamond-sharp point. I will not. Do not defy me on this. The force of his thought was a physical blow. He threatened you. He threatened your mother. He stood in your home and promised to destroy your life. The game is finished. You still don't understand, she countered, her thoughts calm and cold against his fire. It's too late to run. Don't you see? He's not threatening the queen of the underworld. That he wouldn't dare. He is threatening Cora Summer, the celebrated artist. If Cora vanishes tonight, if she flees right after his intimidation, what message does that send? It tells him that he's won. It proves that Cora is my weakness, a lever he can use to control me. He will tear her world apart out of spite, to prove that he can. My mother, my friends, my reputation. He will burn it all to the ground just to see the smoke from your kingdom. A stunned silence met her argument. He saw the cold, inescapable logic of her trap. She was right. Fleeing now would be an admission of a fatal weakness. I cannot run, Aiden, she continued, her voice softening slightly in her mind. I have to fight. Not as a queen in your realm, but as a woman in hers. How? His anger had subsided, replaced by a grim, fearful resignation. You cannot meet his power on the surface. No, she agreed. But I can meet his on the battlefield he has chosen, the world of money and influence. He came after my life's work. It's time I went after his. She rose from her chair and sat before her computer, the sleek screen illuminating her determined face. On it, she pulled up every piece of data her intelligence firm had gathered on Argent Ventures. It was a fortress of phantom capital and shell corporations. He uses Argent Ventures as his primary weapon on the surface, she explained, her plan taking shape as she spoke. It's the source of his influence, the mechanism by which he operates. I'm going to tear it apart. From the inside out. With what army? Aiden asked. With yours, she replied. With the Plutus treasury. You said it was limitless. We're about to test that theory. Thorne's company is built on a flawless but fragile lie. I'm going to introduce the one thing a lie cannot survive. Overwhelming, brute force truth. The truth of capital. Her strategy poured out, a torrent of cold, calculated aggression. She would become a ghost investor. Using the untraceable obsidian card and a series of newly created shell corporations of her own, she would launch a full-scale financial assault. She would short his most profitable stocks. She would buy up the debt of his subsidiary companies. She would financially seduce his partners and fund his competitors, creating chaos and instability within his empire. Simultaneously, she would escalate the information war. Her intelligence firm would not just dig for dirt, it would plant it. They would leak anonymous, carefully crafted tips to financial regulators and investigative journalists about Argent Ventures' miraculous growth, raising questions about its funding and legitimacy. She would turn Thorne's perfect, clean history into a liability, a mystery that the voracious media would be unable to resist. He put a target on Cora Summer, she concluded. I'm going to make Julian Thorne radioactive. For a long time, the quantum link was silent. Persephone knew she was asking Aiden to trust her in a way he never had before, to let her stand on a battlefield where his power could not directly save her, and to wage a war with weapons that were not his own. The vaults are open, he finally sent, his thought imbued with a deep, solemn gravity. Bleed him dry. The first rays of dawn were beginning to streak the New York sky, painting the city in shades of gray and rose. The party was a distant memory. Persephone sat in the cool glow of her monitor, her eyes scanning stock market pre-openings in foreign markets. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, executing the first trade, a massive, anonymous leveraged bet against Argent Ventures' primary technology holding. It was a declaration of war written in the cold, unforgiving language of finance. The goddess of spring had spent millennia nurturing life, coaxing fragile seeds to grow in the rich soil. Now, for the first time, she was learning the grim satisfaction of salting the earth of her enemy. The opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange sounded less like a call to commerce and more like the first cannon shot of a war. Persephone was in her office, which had been transformed. The floral sketches and art books were gone, replaced by an array of monitors displaying market data, secure chat windows, and encrypted news feeds. She wore a simple, severe black blouse, her hair pulled back, the diamond earrings her only adornment. She was no longer Cora the artist, she was the ghost in Wall Street's machine. The effect of her pre-dawn trades was immediate and seismic. A technology firm, the crown jewel of Argent Ventures' public portfolio, opened with a catastrophic 20-point drop. Trading floors buzzed with confusion and panic. Financial news channels broke into their scheduled programming. Unprecedented, Jim, a frantic analyst on a TV screen chattered. We're seeing a massive coordinated short sell targeting Axion Corporation. The volume is astronomical. This isn't a standard correction, this is a targeted assault. Someone with incredibly deep pockets is betting on this company to fail, and they're betting big. Persephone watched, her expression calm, her heart beating with a cold, steady rhythm. She was on a secure audio line with a team of ruthless traders she had hired through a Swiss firm, their identities unknown even to her. They were merely voices, expensive mercenaries in her new war. Phase 2, she commanded, her voice low. Begin the acquisition of Omnigen's corporate debt. And I want the first of the stories from the PR firm leaked to the Financial Times within the hour. Focus on the irregularities in Argent Ventures' initial public offering. She was orchestrating a multi-front attack. While her traders created chaos in the markets, her intelligence firm, now acting as a black ops PR agency, was planting the seeds of doubt in the media. She was attacking not just Thorne's assets, but his very legitimacy. The world saw only market chaos. But across the park, in a silent, minimalist penthouse office, Julian Thorne saw the deliberate hand of an enemy. He stood before a wall of screens, the calm, charismatic mask he wore in public completely gone. His face was a study in cold fury. The numbers on his screens were bleeding red. It's her, he snarled to a subordinate who stood, terrified, a few feet away. The timing is too perfect. This is not a market fluctuation. This is a retaliation. Our analysts can't trace the source, sir, the subordinate stammered. The capital is clean. It's coming from dozens of shell corporations, all newly formed. It's like it's being materialized out of thin air. Find it! Thorne slammed his fist on his obsidian desk, a crack spiderwebbing across its polished surface. I want to know who is backing her. A floral artist does not have the resources to wage a war like this. Find her backer. He turned to a television, where a financial news anchor was announcing that he would be on for an emergency interview in 10 minutes. His expression smoothed over, the rage replaced by a predatory calm. He straightened his tie. They want a show, he murmured to himself. We'll give them a show. Minutes later, Thorne's handsome, reassuring face was being broadcast across the globe. He was the picture of confidence. Volatility is the price of innovation, he said smoothly to the anchor. Our fundamentals at Argent Ventures are stronger than ever. I see this temporary dip not as a crisis, but as a tremendous buying opportunity for those with the courage to invest in the future. He was a master performer. Persephone watched, a flicker of grudging respect mixing with her hatred. He was calming his investors, projecting strength. He was fighting her on his chosen battlefield. But as she watched him speak, she realized her mistake. She had assumed he would meet her financial attack with a financial defense. She had forgotten the kind of creature he was. He wasn't a banker, he was a primordial being. And his methods were far crueler. As Thorne's interview concluded, a breaking news alert flashed at the bottom of the screen. Persephone's blood ran cold. Breaking news: Senator Diana Meter faces inquiry over campaign finance violations, alleged ties to Plutus Group insider trading. Persephone's breath caught in her throat. She clicked open the story. An anonymous source, the article said, had leaked documents to a major political journal detailing suspicious donations to her mother's last campaign, and evidence that the senator had used her position on an environmental committee to pass legislation that benefited Plutus Group, the world's largest and most secretive resource conglomerate. The allegations were absurd, impossible. Her mother had no formal connection to Plutus Group. She only knew it as a powerful, untouchable company she often railed against for its lack of transparency. But the accusations were skillfully crafted, designed to create a media firestorm and trigger a painful, public investigation. On another screen, a live feed from Washington, D.C. appeared. It showed her mother, Diana, leaving a building, suddenly ambushed by a swarm of reporters shouting questions, their cameras flashing in her blindsided, confused face. She looked dignified, but utterly unprepared and deeply distressed. Persephone stared at her mother's image, the victorious thrill of her financial assault turning to ash in her mouth. She had been so focused on attacking Thorne's corporate identity that she had forgotten to protect Cora's most vulnerable point. It was a brutally effective countermove. Thorne couldn't hurt her infinite, untraceable bank account, so he had targeted the one thing in her world that was priceless and utterly fragile: her family. The war was no longer about stocks and algorithms. It had just become about blood. The image on the screen, her mother's bewildered face surrounded by a frenzy of reporters, struck Persephone with the force of a physical blow. The air in her office, moments before electric with the thrill of victory, was suddenly thin and suffocating. The glowing stock tickers, the streams of data, the voices of her traders in her earpiece, all of it faded into an irrelevant hum. This was the true cost of her war, a cost measured not in dollars, but in the anguish of the person she loved most. Guilt, sharp and venomous, coiled in her gut. She had been arrogant. She had wielded Aiden's infinite resources like a god, moving markets and toppling corporate structures, believing she was untouchable. She had forgotten that Cora Summer, her fragile human shell, had roots. Thorne hadn't just found those roots, he had poured poison directly into the well. Her first instinct was a primal, daughterly urge to run, to get on the first train to Washington, D.C., to stand by her mother's side and shield her from the storm. But she couldn't. Her hand froze halfway to her phone. To do so would be to walk directly into Thorne's trap. A panicked, public rush to her mother's defense would be a confession, cementing the very connection that Thorne was trying to exploit. She was shackled by her own secrecy. She touched the diamond in her right ear, the quantum link her only lifeline. She didn't send words or images. She simply opened the channel and let Aiden feel the raw, unfiltered agony and self-recrimination that was flooding her being. The fury that came back from him was a cold, silent supernova. It was a rage beyond the heat of battle, the kind of absolute wrath a king feels when his family is attacked, when the enemy breaks the unspoken rules of engagement and targets civilians. He will not live to see another dawn, Aiden's thought came, not as a boast, but as a solemn, unbreakable vow. No, Persephone sent back, her own voice in her mind fractured but firm. His death would be too simple. It wouldn't undo this. He's not just attacking my mother, he's attacking you through her. He's tying the name Plutus Group to a public political scandal. He's trying to drag your shadow kingdom into the light, to force you to react on the surface world's terms. She forced herself to breathe, to think past the pain. This is a brilliant move, Aiden. He's created a crisis that you cannot solve with force, and I cannot solve with money. If I use my resources to magically clear her name, it will only confirm the suspicion of a powerful, hidden backer. If you send wardens to silence the reporters, you reveal yourself. We are trapped. Aiden's rage cooled, condensed into the lethal focus she recognized. He saw the genius of the trap. Thorne had found the perfect leverage point, a place where their immense power was effectively neutralized by the rules of the surface world. What do you need? His thought was a lifeline. I need a lawyer, she sent back, the absurdity of the statement hanging between them. A goddess queen and the king of the underworld, two of the most powerful beings on the planet, and their next move depended on finding the best legal counsel in Washington, D.C. The best. Someone untouchable, a bulldog who can't be bought or intimidated. I'll fund them anonymously. Consider it done, Aiden replied instantly. A name will be fed to your mother's chief of staff within the hour. But Persephone, what about you? I have to call her, she said, the thought filling her with dread. I have to play the part of Cora, the concerned, distant, slightly self-absorbed daughter calling from New York. I have to lie to her while her world is falling apart because of me. Disconnecting from Aiden, she stared at her phone, at her mother's name on the screen. Making this call felt harder than facing down Julian Thorne. This was a different kind of battle, one fought not with power or strategy, but with the painful weight of deception. She took a shaky breath and dialed. It rang twice before her mother's exhausted, stressed voice answered. Cora, Mom. I just saw the news, Persephone said, forcing a note of shocked disbelief into her voice. What is happening? It's insane. Plutus Group. What do they have to do with you? Oh, sweetheart, Diana sighed, and Persephone could hear the bone-deep weariness behind the words. It's a political hit job, that's what it is. Utter nonsense, fabricated from whole cloth. I've spent my career fighting corporations like Plutus, not taking their money. But who would do this? Persephone pressed, feeling like a tormentor, forcing her mother to recount the attack. Someone who wants to derail the environmental oversight bill. Someone with deep pockets and no conscience. We'll fight it, Cora. The truth is on our side. It's just going to be a terrible, ugly process. There was a pause. I'm sorry, I have to go. My chief of staff is signaling me. Don't you worry about this. Focus on your work. I love you. I love you too, Mom, Persephone whispered. The line went dead. She sat in the silence of her multi-million-dollar office, a queen of two realms, and felt utterly powerless. She had started a war with a primordial power, and the first casualty was her mother's good name. Thorne hadn't just returned her fire. He had escalated the conflict to a new, deeply personal, and far more dangerous level. He had proven that he was willing to burn her entire world to the ground to get at his true enemy. And the fire was just getting started. The feeling of powerlessness that washed over Persephone was fleeting, burned away by the cold, rising fire of pure fury. Guilt was a luxury she could not afford. Regret was a dead weight. Thorne had made a fatal error. He had attacked her mother not just to hurt Cora, the artist, but to provoke Persephone, the queen. He had succeeded. The war room of monitors and financial data now seemed insufficient. The battle had shifted from the abstract realm of capital to the messy, public arena of reputation and politics. Persephone knew she had to shift with it. Hiding in the shadows, even as an aggressive phantom investor, was no longer a viable strategy. Thorne had dragged her family into the light. So she would step into the light herself, not as a victim, but as a combatant. She reconnected with Aiden, her thoughts no longer fractured with pain, but honed to a razor's edge. He's using the surface world as his shield, Aiden. He thinks I won't risk exposing myself to protect my family. He thinks I'll retreat. I am ready to unmake his world. Aiden's response was a low, dangerous rumble. Say the word. Not yet. I have a better idea, she countered. He attacked my mother through the media. He used lies as a weapon. I will use my own platform to create a truth he cannot escape. Cora Summer is about to become very, very public. There was a pause, a wave of concern from Aiden. That is what he wants. To draw you out. He wants a target. He is not expecting a rival, she clarified. He has built his entire identity as Julian Thorne on a flawless, impenetrable public image. I am going to crack it. I'm going to turn the whispers of New York society into a weapon. Her first move was to issue a public statement. It was not a frantic defense of her mother, but a carefully worded piece of art in itself. Released to the Associated Press, it spoke of her deep love and unwavering belief in her mother's integrity. But then it pivoted. She wrote of her upcoming floral collection, announcing its new theme, transparency. In a world of shadows and whispers, the statement read, true beauty is found in things that are authentic, that have roots, that can withstand the glare of the brightest light. My new collection will be a celebration of truth, and a meditation on the corrupting nature of secrets. It was a declaration of war disguised as an artist's manifesto. Her next move was to call her mother's embattled chief of staff. I'm coming to Washington, she said, her voice calm and firm. Not for a press conference. I'm coming to host a fundraiser for the Legal Defense Fund. A private event for your most loyal supporters. We will fight this with elegance and solidarity. She was seizing control of the narrative, transforming a political scandal into a social cause célèbre that New York's elite would be eager to support. In the days that followed, Persephone became a whirlwind of controlled, public activity. She was photographed at gallery openings, her expression serene and determined. She gave an exclusive interview to Vogue about her transparency collection, speaking eloquently about the hollowness of entities without a past, and the dangers of new growth that is rootless and unnatural. Every word was a poisoned dart aimed directly at Julian Thorne. She began to work the social networks of the city with the precision of a master spy. At a cocktail party, she would murmur to a powerful banker, Argent Ventures is fascinating, isn't it? Such a meteoric rise. Almost miraculous. To a gossip columnist, she'd let slip, one has to wonder, a man as brilliant as Julian Thorne, where has he been all these years? It's as if he just appeared. She was not making accusations. She was simply asking questions, planting seeds of doubt in the fertile soil of high society's natural suspicion. Aiden supported her from the shadows. The great search of the Archive of Souls, conducted by Mr. Amen, finally yielded a sliver of ammunition. It was a memory fragment from a recently deceased hedge fund manager who, a decade prior, had backed out of a deal with a mysterious consortium that felt fundamentally wrong. He described their leader as a man with old eyes and an ambition that felt like it could swallow the world. The consortium's name was different, but the methodology was the same. Aiden fed this information to Persephone. Armed with this kernel of truth, her rumors gained weight. The story began to spread. Thorne wasn't new. He was a phantom who had operated under other names, associated with deals that had mysteriously collapsed, leaving others in financial ruin. The effect was subtle but immediate. She saw it at a charity dinner for the city's orchestra. Julian Thorne was there, holding court as usual. But the circle around him was slightly smaller. The laughter at his jokes was a little less enthusiastic. People were watching him now, a new curiosity in their eyes. He was no longer just the brilliant newcomer. He was the brilliant, mysterious newcomer. And in their world, mystery was a liability. He saw her across the grand ballroom. Their eyes met. His charming smile was fixed in place, but she saw a new light in his ancient eyes. It was not hunger or amusement. It was the cold, calculating fury of an opponent who realizes their adversary is not the pawn they imagined, but a rival queen. He had wanted to drag her into the light to make her a target. He had no idea how brightly a queen of the underworld could burn when she finally chose to embrace the sun. The ride home from the charity dinner was a descent into a heavy, ringing silence. The adrenaline of the confrontation with Thorne faded, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness that came from wearing a mask for too long. In the secure quiet of the town car, Persephone leaned her head against the cool glass, the glittering skyline of Manhattan blurring into streaks of gold and silver. She was winning, she thought, but the victories were costing her pieces of a piece she wasn't sure she could ever reclaim. You were magnificent, Aiden's thought came through the earring, a warm, steady presence in her exhaustion. You met his fire and did not flinch. I've made him angry, Aiden, she sent back. He is not a man who tolerates being challenged. The whispers were one thing. A public rivalry is another. He will retaliate, and it won't be subtle this time. Her prediction proved correct less than 48 hours later. The attack came not through the markets or the tabloids, but from the most respected name in broadcast journalism. A venerable, highly rated news program announced a special, live primetime event, Titans and Visionaries, the new face of New York. It would be a joint interview with two of the city's most compelling and enigmatic figures, Julian Thorne, the financial prodigy reshaping Wall Street, and Cora Summer, the brilliant artist redefining the cultural landscape. The invitation, delivered by a formal courier, was a masterstroke of strategic warfare. It was a gilded cage, presented as a golden opportunity. The host was a journalist famous for his incisive, no-holds-barred questions. The format was live, with no safety net. Persephone stared at the invitation, seeing the trap with perfect clarity. If she declined, she would appear weak, a coward who could cast stones from the shadows of high society but was afraid of a direct confrontation. The narrative she had carefully built, of a strong woman defending her family and her artistic principles, would crumble. She would be seen as a fraud. If she accepted, she would be walking onto a stage of Thorne's choosing, facing a master of deception and public performance in front of an audience of millions. He would try to dissect her, to expose the inconsistencies of her life, to paint her as an unstable, emotional artist and her mother as a corrupt politician. Her publicist and her mother's legal team were unanimous. She had to decline. "It's a setup, Cora," her lead lawyer told her over a frantic phone call. "You have everything to lose and nothing to gain." That evening, she discussed it with Aiden. His response was an immediate and absolute refusal. "No, Persephone. It is an ambush. He is a predator of words and perception. He has existed for centuries by creating flawless illusions. You will not walk into his den. And if I refuse," she countered, pacing her office, "then he wins. He proves I'm afraid. He regains control of the story. Everything I've worked for these past weeks will be undone. I started this public fight, Aiden. I cannot run from its first decisive battle. This is not a battle you can win with your power." "I know," she replied, her voice calm in her mind. "This is a battle I have to win with Cora's strength. With her wit, her intelligence, her resolve. He thinks he's setting a trap for a fragile artist. He is about to find himself on a live stage with the queen of the underworld, and she has been holding court for a very, very long time." There was a long silence on the quantum link, filled with his fear and her unbending will. Finally, his assent came, heavy with reluctance. "Then we will arm you for it." The next 3 days were the most intense of her life on the surface. Her penthouse became a war room dedicated to a single objective. The lawyers Aiden had provided for her mother flew in from DC. They were not there to give her talking points, but to train her in the art of verbal combat. They subjected her to brutal mock interviews, playing the part of a hostile press, teaching her how to deflect, pivot, and turn an opponent's question into a weapon against them. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Aiden had tasked Mr. Amen and the entire archive of souls with a single, desperate task: find a crack in Julian Thorne's armor. They sifted through millennia of memories, searching for a name, a date, a forgotten deal, anything that could be corroborated on the surface. The night before the interview, the breakthrough came. It was small, a fragile thread, but it was something. A memory from a London banker who had died 20 years ago. He spoke of a shadowy investor who had orchestrated a hostile takeover of a shipping firm. The investor had used a different name, but the banker's description of his cold charisma and ancient eyes was unmistakable. The crucial detail: the banker recalled the name of a junior associate who had been ruined in the deal, a young man who had lost everything. His name was Marcus Thorne. No relation, the banker had thought at the time. A quick search of public records by Persephone's intelligence firm confirmed it. Marcus Thorne had been a rising star in the London financial world 2 decades ago. After the takeover, he had a nervous breakdown, lost his fortune, and vanished into obscurity. Julian Thorne's flawless, fabricated history had one tiny, loose thread: a victim with the same last name. It was not a smoking gun, but it was a poison needle, and it might be all she needed. The day of the interview arrived. Persephone sat in the sterile, brightly lit green room of the television studio. She wore a simple, elegant ivory dress, a deliberate choice to present herself as a figure of light and truth. She looked calm, her hands resting in her lap. Michael stood guard outside her door, a silent mountain of loyalty. A producer stuck his head in. 5 minutes, Ms. Summer. She nodded, her heart beating a slow, steady, regal rhythm. She closed her eyes and touched the diamond in her right ear. "I am with you," Aiden's thought came, a current of immense, unwavering strength. "Show him the face of a true monarch." She took one deep breath, the Queen of Shadows inhaling the stale, air-conditioned air of the mortal world's arena. She stood, the ivory dress falling in perfect lines around her. The stage was set. The unblinking eye of the camera was waiting. And so was her enemy. The television studio was a circle of manufactured light in a universe of darkness. The heat from the lamps was a physical presence, pressing down on Persephone as she took her seat opposite Julian Thorne. He was already there, looking impeccably relaxed, chatting amiably with the host, David Paxton. He gave Persephone a gracious, welcoming smile, the kind a king might give to a visiting dignitary he was about to execute. It was a performance of effortless dominance. The cameras, silent and black, glided into position like robotic predators. The floor manager counted down, his voice a disembodied echo. The applause sign lit up, the studio audience clapped on cue, and then, a single red light on the central camera glowed, and they were live. Good evening, and welcome to Titans and Visionaries, David Paxton began, his voice the familiar, trusted baritone of a seasoned journalist. Tonight, we have two remarkable individuals who represent the new, dynamic face of New York. Julian Thorne, the financial visionary whose firm, Argent Ventures, has redefined the market. And Cora Summer, the brilliant artist who, after a period of seclusion, has returned to the forefront of the art world. Welcome to you both. Thorne was a master. He spoke of innovation, of seeing patterns where others saw chaos, of his belief in a bold, fearless future. He was charming, visionary, and utterly convincing. Then, Paxton turned to Persephone. Ms. Summer, it's wonderful to have you back in the public eye. Your new collection, Transparency, has generated enormous buzz. But it also comes at a time when your family, specifically your mother, Senator Meter, has been forced under a difficult and very public spotlight. How has that ordeal influenced your work? It was the first attack, a carefully worded jab. Persephone met it without flinching. Thank you, David, she said, her voice calm and clear. Naturally, I love my mother, and I have absolute faith in her integrity. What her situation has highlighted for me, and for many I think, is how easily shadows can be weaponized in our society. It's reinforced my artistic conviction that we must challenge the things that have no history, no clear origin. True strength, whether in a family or a company, comes from having roots that can withstand public scrutiny. My work is about celebrating that kind of truth. She had taken his personal probe and turned it into a direct, philosophical shot across Thorne's bow. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw his smile tighten by a fraction of a millimeter. Paxton, sensing the tension, turned back to Thorne. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Summer speaks of roots and history. Your own track record with Argent Ventures is flawless, but remarkably short. To what do you attribute your unprecedented success? To data, David. Pure and simple, Thorne said smoothly, leaning forward. The market is a place of logic, not emotion. While artists like Ms. Summer create beauty from passion, and we are all the richer for it, our world requires a cooler head. It requires consistency, a proven track record, and above all, being present. Success isn't built during long, unexplained sabbaticals. It is built day by day, quarter by quarter. He was painting her as the emotional, unreliable artist against his cool, dependable logic. He was trying to invalidate her entire perspective. This was her moment. You're absolutely right, Mr. Thorne, she said, her tone one of polite agreement. History and track records are paramount. A foundation is everything. It's a subject I've become fascinated by. She turned in her chair to face him more directly, her expression one of pleasant, academic curiosity. The camera zoomed in, sensing a shift. While researching the theme of corporate transparency, I was reading about historical market disruptions. I came across a tragic story from the London Exchange, about 20 years ago. A brilliant but ruthless hostile takeover of a shipping firm. The architect of that deal was a shadowy figure, and his methods were so similar to the disruptive strategies we see today. It was quite fascinating. She paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat. Thorne's posture was rigid, his smile a painted mask. The reason it stuck with me, she continued, her voice gentle, is that one of the junior partners who was financially ruined in the collapse was a promising young man named Marcus Thorne. A terrible story. I was just wondering, any relation? The needle, coated in the poison of a forgotten truth, found its mark. It was not an accusation. It was an innocent, perfectly delivered question. But in that moment, in front of millions of people, she had ripped a hole in his flawless, fabricated past. She had given a name to the ghosts he had left behind. She had proven he was a lie. A flicker. For a single, solitary frame of television, the mask of Julian Thorne slipped. Before the charming CEO returned, Persephone saw something ancient and cold look out through his eyes, a flash of pure, murderous rage. He recovered instantly. He gave a small, dismissive laugh. Ms. Summer, you have been doing your research. Thorne is a common name, I'm afraid. I can't be expected to know every tragedy that befalls every person who shares it. But the denial was hollow. The damage was done. She hadn't needed a smoking gun. She had just needed to show the world that there was a gun, and that it had been fired before. Paxton, a master of his craft, saw the kill shot. He knew the interview had reached its peak. He skillfully wrapped the segment, thanking them both for their time. The applause sign lit up, the lights dimmed, and the war, for a moment, was over. Persephone walked off the set, her legs steady, her adrenaline singing. The host, David Paxton, caught her arm as she passed. Ms. Summer, he said, his professional mask gone, his eyes alight with respect. That was the finest piece of television I've been a part of in a decade. She merely smiled. As she reached the quiet hallway where Michael was waiting, her publicist ran up to her, his phone pressed to his ear, his face ecstatic. "Cora, my God. You were unbelievable," he hissed, his voice trembling with excitement. "The internet is exploding. Forget the scandal. Forget everything. Everyone is asking the same question." He looked at her, his eyes wide with wonder. "Who is Marcus Thorne?" Persephone allowed herself a small, cold smile. She had turned millions of viewers into an army of private investigators, all of them now digging at the foundations of the man who had threatened her world. The drive back to the penthouse was surreal. Persephone's phone was a vibrating, glowing brick of adulation. Texts from her publicist, emails from gallery owners, and alerts from news apps all painted the same picture. She had not just won the debate, she had redrawn the entire map. Cora Summer was no longer just an artist. She was a giant slayer, a cultural icon of integrity. And Julian Thorne, for the first time since his immaculate conception, was on the defensive. "You have wounded his pride," Aiden's voice echoed in her mind, a sober warning amidst the triumphant noise. "A thing far more dangerous than his assets. The serpent is cornered. It will strike back, and it will not use words." "I know," she sent back, the elation of her victory already cooling into a grim watchfulness. "I wounded his mortal disguise. He will retaliate as the monster he truly is." The next morning, the world was obsessed with the mystery she had created. #WhoIsMarcusThorne was trending globally. Financial journalists were digging with renewed fervor, their articles now tinged with a delicious hint of conspiracy. All the praise and admiration being heaped upon Cora Summer was directly proportional to the suspicion now being cast upon Julian Thorne. His carefully crafted illusion of perfection was hemorrhaging credibility with every passing hour. He was being undone by a question. It was a masterful public victory, and it was the last moment of peace Persephone would know. The retaliation, when it came, was not financial, nor was it political. It was an act of pure nihilistic venom, designed not just to counter her move, but to annihilate her. The news broke in the late afternoon. A prominent and famously acerbic art critic, a man named Alastair Finch, had been found dead in his apartment. Finch had, only a week prior, written a widely read, skeptical column about the overnight sensation of Cora Summer's Transparency project and her theatrically convenient defense of her mother. Persephone felt a cold knot of dread form in her stomach as she read the initial report. Then she saw the detail that made her blood run cold. The cause of death was cardiac arrest, brought on by a rare, unidentified neurotoxin. The coroner's preliminary notes, already leaked to the press, stated the toxin appeared to be derived from an exotic, unclassified botanical source. The trap was as brilliant as it was monstrous. It struck at the very heart of her identity. Her greatest strength, her divine connection to the living world, had been twisted into the perfect murder weapon. Her phone began to ring. It was her frantic publicist. "Cora, I'm getting calls from every reporter in the city. They're trying to connect Finch's death to you, to your work with rare plants. It's insane, but they're running with it." She hung up, her mind racing. This was Thorne's move. He couldn't attack her finances. He couldn't win a war of public opinion. So he had changed the game entirely. He was framing her for murder, using a method so bizarre and so perfectly tailored to her persona that it would be impossible to ignore. He was going to turn Cora the artist into Cora the assassin. She immediately opened the channel to Aiden. "He's framed me. A critic is dead. Poisoned. He made it look like it was one of my plants." Aiden's rage was a silent, crushing force. "The rules are broken. Michael will extract you. You are coming home. The surface world is lost. There's nowhere to run, Aiden." She sent back, a note of desperation creeping into her thoughts. "If I vanish now, I look guilty. It's the perfect checkmate. He's using the mortal world's own laws against me." Her left earring, the threat detector, suddenly flared with an intense, piercing heat. It wasn't the signature of one entity, but dozens. They were human, but they were radiating an energy of focused, aggressive intent. The door to her office burst open. Michael stood there, his face, for the first time since she had known him, was not impassive. It was etched with grave urgency. "My queen," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "We have to leave. Now. They are coming." As he spoke, a sound began to rise from the street below, a sound that cut through the fabric of her protected, luxurious life, the unmistakable Doppler wail of approaching sirens. One, then two, then a dozen. They were converging on her building. An anonymous tip, Thorne's final move, had no doubt pointed them directly to her door. Persephone rushed to the window and looked down. A sea of flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Police cars and tactical vans were surrounding her penthouse. She was trapped. The queen of the underworld, a being of immense power, was about to be cornered by a dozen mortal police officers. She had fought her enemy with wit and strategy, but he had responded by dropping the entire weight of the human justice system on her head. The intercom on her desk buzzed, a harsh, demanding sound. It was the doorman from the lobby, his voice trembling. "Ms. Summer? The police are here. They have a warrant for your arrest." The world narrowed to three distinct, warring pressures. The wail of the sirens from the street below, a physical manifestation of Thorne's victory. The frantic, terrified command of Aiden in her mind, a psychic storm urging her to flee. And the unwavering stillness of Michael, a silent question of which world she would choose to save. Flee, Persephone. Aiden's thought was a desperate, angry roar. "Let Michael clear a path. I will burn a tunnel to you if I have to. You are a queen, not a mortal criminal. Do not let them touch you." She could see the path he offered. A blur of violence. Michael, a being of impossible power, disabling the mortal officers. An escape into the shadows. A descent back to her throne, safe and untouchable. And in her wake, the smoldering ruins of Cora Summer's life. Cora would become a fugitive, a murderer. Her mother's career would be utterly destroyed, tainted by a daughter who was a killer on the run. Thorne would win. He would have successfully amputated the surface world from her, proving it was nothing more than a liability. Then she saw the other path. A path of humiliation, powerlessness, and terrifying uncertainty. A path that led not to a throne, but to a cold, sterile room and a pair of steel handcuffs. It was the path where she didn't run. In that split second, she made her choice. She turned to Michael, whose hand was already raised, ready to turn the penthouse door into dust. "No," she said, her voice calm and absolute. It was the voice of a queen, but the command was one of restraint. "Stand down, Michael. No powers. No one gets hurt. You are my bodyguard. That is all. Do you understand?" Michael's expression was a mask of tormented conflict, his loyalty to her warring with his duty to protect her. But the order was absolute. He lowered his hand and gave a single, stiff nod, his form seeming to diminish, shedding the aura of a warden and becoming merely a tall, imposing man in a suit. She then turned her focus inward, to the raging king in her mind. "Aiden, listen to me," she sent, her thought a steady, calming force against his panic. "If I run, he wins. He proves that Cora is just a mask I am willing to discard. He destroys everything I love up here. I am not abandoning this world. I am going to fight for it. From the inside. You must trust me. You must let this happen. They will put you in a cage." He raged. "I have been in cages before," she replied, a thought laced with an ancient sadness. "This one is just smaller than most. Prepare the lawyers. Fight the public battle. I will handle the rest. Trust me." She cut the connection before he could argue further, leaving him in a silent kingdom with his fury and fear. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the intercom and pressed the button. "Send them up," she said to the doorman, her voice even. Moments later, heavy, authoritative knocks sounded on her door. Michael, now fully in his role, opened it. Two stern-faced detectives in trench coats stood there, flanked by uniformed officers. Their eyes swept the room, taking in the impossible luxury, the dark, ominous flower still sitting in the studio, and finally, the calm woman standing in the center of it all. "Cora Summer?" the lead detective asked, his voice rough. "I am," she said. "You're under arrest for the murder of Alistair Finch," he stated, stepping forward. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Persephone didn't flinch as he recited the familiar words. She listened as if she were a student of mortal rituals. The surrealism of the moment was absolute. A goddess being read her Miranda rights. She held out her hands, and the cold, unforgiving metal of the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sensation was a shock, a tangible symbol of her new, terrifying powerlessness. The walk from her apartment was a gauntlet of horrified and curious stares from her neighbors. But it was nothing compared to the scene in the lobby. Thorne had timed his anonymous tip perfectly. The press had arrived. As the police led her out the front doors, the night exploded in a blinding barrage of camera flashes. Reporters surged forward, a wall of shouting and microphones. "Ms. Summer, did you kill Alistair Finch? Is it true the poison came from one of your plants? Cora, why would you do it?" She kept her head held high, her face a mask of dignified, shocked innocence, just as the lawyers had taught her. She was not a cornered goddess. She was a respected public figure, the victim of a terrible accusation. She let them see Cora Summer being arrested, not Persephone being captured. She was placed in the back of a police car, the door shutting with a deafening finality. Through the cage divider, she watched her gilded life, the doorman tipping his hat, the facade of her expensive building, the silent, watchful form of Michael being held back by a police line, recede into the flashing chaos. The car pulled away, joining the chorus of sirens. She was alone, cut off from her power, her kingdom, her freedom. The queen of the underworld, a prisoner of mortal law, was being driven through the streets of her own hunting ground. She had willingly walked into the heart of the serpent's trap, betting her entire existence on the fragile hope that the truth, in this world of lies, was still a weapon. In the silent, obsidian heart of the underworld, a king watched his queen get caged. Aiden stood alone in the command center, the vast chamber dark save for the single, massive holographic display at its center. It showed a live, pirated feed from a New York City police precinct security camera. The image was grainy, mundane. It showed Persephone, Cora, being led into a small, gray interrogation room. She was uncuffed, and a lawyer, a man Aiden's power had materialized from the highest echelons of the legal world, was now with her. She was physically unharmed, but she was a prisoner. The fury he had felt before was gone. In its place was a stillness so profound, so absolute, it felt like the temperature in the chamber had dropped to absolute zero. It was the calm of a collapsing star, an entity of unimaginable power compressing its entire being into a single, infinitely dense point of purpose. She had asked him to trust her. She had asked him to let this happen. He had honored her choice. But he had made no promises about his own actions in the aftermath. The serpent had broken the rules of engagement. It had used the mortal world to touch his queen. Aiden would now respond by unmaking that world. "Summon the triumvirate," he said to the empty room. His voice was quiet, but the command resonated through the very stones of his kingdom. Within moments, General Radner, Director Miles, and Mr. Amen stood before him. They had seen the feeds. They had watched the arrest. Their ancient, composed faces were masks of cold, unified outrage. The indignity was absolute. "The enemy has taken the queen," Aiden stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "They have used the mortal's own laws to put her in a cage of iron and ignorance. This act will not stand." "Give the order, my king," General Radner rumbled, his basalt form radiating menace. "My wardens can level that precinct and retrieve her before the mortals can even process what is happening." "No," Aiden said, turning to face them. "The queen has made a choice. She has chosen to fight this battle on the surface, within their system, to preserve the life she has built there. To storm the gates would be to destroy the very thing she is fighting for. We will not override her strategy. We will enable it. We will arm it so completely that the mortal world itself will bend to her will." He raised his hand, and the holographic display shifted, showing a complex web of New York's power structures, legal, political, and media. "Our response will be twofold," he declared, his eyes glowing with a cold, internal light. "We will fight a war in the light, and a war in the shadows." He looked at Director Miles. "The first is the Queen's War. You will provide her with a legal and public relations machine the likes of which the surface world has never seen. Her legal team will have an infinite budget. I want every top investigator, every forensic expert, every jury consultant that can be bought. I want you to purchase a controlling interest in the media outlets attacking her and silence them. You will create a wave of public support so overwhelming that it drowns out Thorne's lies. You will give the Queen her battlefield, and you will ensure she is armed with the light of 1,000 suns." Director Miles bowed his head. "The treasury is open. Their world will learn the true meaning of capital." "Then there is our war," Aiden continued, turning to his other two commanders. "The war in the shadows." His gaze fell upon Mr. Amen. Thorne used a network to frame her. A lab technician who falsified a report. An anonymous source who called the police. Political operatives who fed the story to the press. You will find them. Every single one. Sift through the city's digital consciousness. Pluck their names from the memories of the echoes. I want a complete chain of command, from the lowest pawn to Thorne himself. "The archive is already at work," Amen whispered. "They cannot hide from a billion ghosts." "And once you have the names," Aiden said, his eyes finally locking with the stony visage of General Radner, "you will hunt them. Not to kill," he commanded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "That is too merciful. You will visit them. One by one. You will show them a glimpse of the powers they are serving. You will strip away their secrets, their security, their belief that they are safe in their mortal world. You will fill them with a terror so profound that they will run to the authorities themselves to confess their crimes, just to escape the shadows that have begun to hunt them. You will dismantle Thorne's network not with force, but with fear. Absolute, soul-shattering fear. General Radnor's form seemed to darken. A pleasure, my king. The triumvirate departed, leaving Aiden alone once more. The vast, silent machine of the underworld had been given its orders. It was now turning its full, terrifying might towards the unsuspecting surface. Aiden stood, a lonely king before a grainy image of his imprisoned queen. He had let her walk into the cage. He could not break it open for her, but he would burn the entire world down around it, leaving the cage and her enemy as the only things left to fall. The serpent wanted a war on the surface. Aiden would give him one that would make him beg for the simple oblivion of the underworld.